All right, it looks like it is 5 o'clock and we have everyone here. So why don't we go ahead and call this October 13th special session of the Albany Planning and Zoning Commission meeting to order. With that, can we have roll call?
Yes, Commissioner Donaldson.
Unmute here.
Commissioner McLeod.
Here.
Commissioner Moman.
Here.
Commissioner Pilch.
Present.
Chair Waddy.
Here. Thank you. That brings us on to our item for our special session, which is a study session, item 1-1 on the San Pablo Avenue specific plan. And with that, I'll turn it over to staff and consultant for a presentation.
Yes, I've just upgraded Jeannie Iceberg of Lexington Planning to panelist, so she should be coming up on the screen here momentarily with a presentation for you this evening. Once again, we're coming back to you with another study session on the specific plan. This time our focus today is on traffic and infrastructure, which are statutory requirements to do a specific plan in California. We have to do that related civil engineering and traffic analysis. And so that is what Jeannie will provide you a presentation with this evening.
Okay, good evening, Chair Waddy and members of the Commission. Sorry, it took me a little while to get through the portal here. I'm going to be joined by a couple other folks who are still trying to sign on. I think they had a couple little glitches, but I will introduce you to Susan Albanese from Sandus Engineering and Mark Spencer from W-Trans, and they're going to be presenting tonight on the infrastructure and transportation aspects of the report. So while they are still joining, I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. Oops. Start at the beginning. Pardon me. Okay, so I'm going to recap the project for those who are participating for the first time. And then we're going to be discussing the infrastructure plan and analysis of the potential development of the specific plan and the traffic analysis of the development potential of the specific plan. And then we'll have a discussion. So the reasons that we do this are at least three. First, we want to make sure we identify any necessary infrastructure improvements. These are primarily heavy infrastructure improvements, water, wastewater, to support development of the specific plan. So understanding pipe upgrades, things like that. This helps ensure that, and we want to make sure we ensure that these improvements proceed in tandem with the specific plan. The general plan talks about this, but we want to make sure that those infrastructure systems are in place when the new development comes in. And then the third piece is that CEQA requires that we do this. So we're also evaluating the plan with respect to physical impacts on the environment consistent with the California Environmental Quality Act. And so sometimes you'll see in the analysis, this looks like two different methods. And one, we're looking at the impact of the plan as a whole on infrastructure. And then two, we're looking at the difference between what the general plan projected and what the specific plan projected. And the reason we're doing that is because we anticipate preparing an addendum to the general plan to satisfy CEQA for the specific plan. And so that nexus between the general plan and the specific plan is important. So recapping the project, our purpose is dictated by the SB2 application for this, which funds this project, which was endorsed by the City Council. But the genesis of this, or the gist of this, comes out of the general plan, which envisioned a transformation of the San Pablo Avenue corridor from an auto-oriented commercial corridor to more attractive pedestrian-oriented mixed-use development. And this does mean that we anticipate redevelopment of vacant sites, of one-story commercial sites into taller buildings. So the specific plan is going to look at updates to the zoning ordinance, the general plan, because general plan amendments will likely be required, and changes to design guidelines. And the intent is to right-size those standards to facilitate that more pedestrian-oriented mixed-use vision. So we've seen this slide before, but looking across the corridor from city to city, you can see that Albany's heights are generally lower. So in El Cerrito, the height limit's about 65 feet, 85 feet in some places with a density bonus. In Berkeley, it's 40 feet for residential projects or 50 feet for mixed-use projects. And as we've talked about, projects in Berkeley often use state density bonus law, which is how you see that 5 or 6 story development on San Pablo. Emeryville also has a local density bonus program. In Emeryville, we see about 50-foot heights on San Pablo Avenue, but up to 100 feet in certain zoning districts on San Pablo with that bonus. And then Oakland, obviously a much longer corridor within San Pablo Avenue and a range of heights up to 120 feet downtown. So we've had a number of meetings with the Planning Commission along the way, most recently talking about land use just last month. We had a virtual open house over the winter, as you recall, with over 400 participants. Last time we spoke, just a few weeks ago, we did a straw poll that's included in your packet. I know there were some areas of or desire to talk about some of these areas a little bit more, and staff will be coming back to continue those conversations at a later date. But for now, the results of that straw poll are attached to the staff report. When we spoke earlier this summer in May, we provided an estimate of development potential, or what we call build out of the specific plan. And that looked at opportunity sites on the corridor, looked at prototypical densities and heights to anticipate about how many units and about how much commercial development could proceed on the corridor. So as you may recall, we predicted about 1,100 units across the corridor and about 45,000 square feet of commercial development. As I mentioned earlier, there's a substantial amount of commercial development that would be lost due to the new housing. Again, removing about 1-story commercial uses on the corridor and replacing those with housing and smaller footprint ground floor retail results in a net loss of about 74,000 square feet of commercial development. And so when we think about how we compare, I mentioned earlier, we're comparing the general plan and the specific plan for the purposes of, as we anticipate preparing the addendum to the EIR, that net change between the general plan and the specific plan is important. And as particularly as Mark Spencer's going through his piece in terms of the traffic analysis, we'll see how that plays out. We have the general plan anticipated relative to the specific plan, more jobs and fewer housing units. We have inverted that with the specific plan and are now anticipating more housing units and fewer jobs. And that changes the amount of traffic we can expect. It changes sort of those peak demand periods of when you can expect that traffic to materialize on the corridor. And so that is a shift in the analysis and a shift in the outcomes in terms of what we can expect on the corridor. So I'm now going to pass it on to Susan, who I introduced earlier. She's made it through the portal, hooray. And she's going to present this next piece of the presentation. Thank you, Susan.
Sounds good. Hi, everyone. My name is Susan Albanus. I'm with Sandus Civil Engineers. Our office is located in Oakland, and we have been brought on board for this process to review the infrastructure in the specific plan area. And we were tasked with looking at several pieces of the infrastructure system. We looked at storm drainage, water, sanitary sewer, and the energy systems being electrical and natural gas. And then we also touched on solid waste as well. So we started our efforts with the storm drain system. We reviewed city block maps. We spoke with city personnel, and essentially the development in the area would see not an increase in stormwater runoff. It would likely be a decrease in stormwater runoff just because of the state stormwater regulations that are passed down to different regions. So locally, we have the C3 stormwater requirements that are triggered at various sizes of development, but generally it heavily promotes the use of landscape areas, bioretention areas for treating stormwater, and also promotes the use of pervious pavement and other techniques as well that generally will lead to a reduction in the amount of pervious surface in urban areas that are primarily built out like this area currently is. So we would anticipate a decrease in stormwater runoff as a result of the specific plan area development. And in speaking with city staff, there have been some system improvements recently for the storm drain system, but there are no anticipated issues with the development occurring due to that, the forecasted decrease in stormwater runoff. So there really are no current storm drains within the development area that would need replacement or upsizing based on this development. Then we moved into water. Water is supplied by East Bay Mud. And again, with the built out area in the San Pablo corridor, there's not a lot of need for, or I would say no need for additional water piping infrastructure due to the development. During our research, what we found were some old pipes and pipes that are smaller than what may be required for a development such as this. There are a few 4-inch lines. There's a 4-inch water line in San Pablo and another one a block over. I'd have to look at, let me pull it up, a block over in Canes. There's a 4-inch water line there as well. In our discussions with East Bay Mud, the 4-inch water line in San Pablo is on their radar for replacement and upsizing. So that is not a direct result of any development. That is due to the age and the small size of that pipe. And the 4-inch water line in Canes is also on their radar for future replacement, again, due to the age. I believe they're about 90 to 100 years old and the small size. So generally, hydrants, water supply to buildings for fire suppression, 4-inch is a small pipe, and East Bay Mud is aware of that, and they would, in these improvements of these smaller lines, already plan to upsize those to 4-inch, or I'm sorry, upsize them to 6-inch or 8-inch. So the few deficiencies that we did see in the system are already being addressed by East Bay Mud as a separate project, not due to the San Pablo corridor development. Then we looked at the sanitary sewer in the area. Again, spoke with city personnel, looked at block maps, talked about any areas experiencing issues. And again, there are localized sanitary sewer pipes that are either have been upsized or will be in the near future due to capacity issues. However, looking globally at the San Pablo corridor development, there's no known pipelines that would not be able to support the development, looking at it as a global development. When a particular developer comes in and may be developing a parcel, there may be upsizing of lines or extending of utility lines that may be necessary to feed that new development. If, for instance, it's going from a single family residential to condos or townhomes or commercial space, there may be a need to upsize a line or extend it further up the street. However, that wouldn't be something due to the overall development along the corridor. That would just be something that the developer would need for that particular building. But looking globally at the project, we did not find any downstream deficient pipeline that would need to be upsized or replaced for the development. With that said, the city has a sanitary sewer modeling consultant that was kind enough to offer to look at this more in depth. So that's a little above and beyond what would normally occur in more of a global view. So we may find out more information through that avenue. However, our findings during our research is that there's no need to currently upgrade or upsize any sanitary pipes due to the development. As far as energy, as I mentioned, we looked at electrical and natural gas. This is provided by PG&E. Again, due to this being an urban built out area, the infrastructure is there, the supply, PG&E would not commit to supplying the development. That process gets triggered by filling out applications is when they make that determination. However, there was no indication or red flags. Generally, the infrastructure is in place, the existing buildings are being supplied by gas and electric. So there was no necessary infrastructure upgrades noted in the report for either gas or electric. The same also goes for telecom. We touched on this in our research. Generally, internet cable is supplied by a handful of providers, including Xfinity, AT&T, Earthlink, Sonic. Again, the infrastructure is in the ground or in the vicinity, and the buildings are currently supplied with telecom, so there aren't any anticipated upgrades needed there. There is undergrounding of overhead utilities that local jurisdictions have been undergoing. They've been undergrounding the overhead utilities. Sometimes that falls on a developer. Sometimes there are larger programs to fund the undergrounding of overhead utilities. I believe the majority of San Pablo is now underground, but the streets on either side still have some above ground utilities that may then be put underground, but that responsibility would fall on each individual developer. So again, not directly related to the San Pablo corridor development. solid waste, again, looking more globally at where the waste is taken, the transfer station, the landfill, the recycling facility, the contacts we reached out to, the research we did, again, no concerns or changes needed for the development in the area.
Okay, thank you, Susan. We are going to shift over to traffic analysis, and is going to help Mark Spencer from W-Trans enter the meeting.
Yeah, I'm actually in the meeting.
Oh, good. There you are.
I am here. Hello, and thank you for having me here today. Again, I'm Mark Spencer. I'm a senior principal with W-Trans based in Oakland. I have a series of about 4 slides to talk about the transportation analysis associated with the program. So let's start. On the first one, there's been a change in traffic analysis since the general plan was prepared, and this is affecting how traffic analysis and transportation analysis is being done statewide. Level of service has been a common metric, or LOS, a term that's been used to analyze intersections and roadways, ramps, and all sorts of transportation facilities, and based on letter grades from A to F. And we've been using that for the better part of 40 years, maybe more actually. And with recent changes to CEQA, as dictated from OPR, as of July of 2020, vehicle miles traveled is the metric to be used to evaluate transportation impacts, environmental impacts. Operationally, we will still be looking at level of service as a way to look at what the effects are operationally and what kind of improvements may be needed. But environmental impacts are focused now on vehicle miles traveled, and it really levels the playing field. I just want to describe, because I know this might be the first time this has been seen or that we've talked about it here in Albany. Previously, when we talked about level of service, we were focused on a development or a program or a general plan, and we say, what is the effect on drivers? How are we impacting the drivers? Now we've done a 180-degree turn, and we're saying, what's the effect of driving on the community, on the environment? And that's the shift in the focus that I want to draw your attention to. In this particular instance, as Jean mentioned earlier, from the general plan to the specific plan, we will see an increase in housing and a reduction in commercial activity and in jobs. And that does affect trip generation and also the traffic patterns and what time of day traffic is occurring. But in general, we're actually anticipating that this is going to be positive in terms of vehicle miles traveled. Positive in this sense of, because the corridor is well aligned with transit services, high capacity transit, no, stay on that slide, Gene, I'm sorry. High capacity transit on San Pablo Avenue, and the northern part of the corridor being quite accessible to BART. All of that being within a half mile of high capacity, high quality transit means that we would anticipate a less than significant impact on vehicle miles traveled. In other words, taking advantage of the resources that are available within that half mile walk shed to these transit services and high quality transit services. So again, this is a positive thing. On the next slide, please. Now, level of service is something that we've typically looked at. In the case of the general plan in Albany looked at San Pablo Avenue and certain segments of San Pablo Avenue in terms of an A or B or C or a D. And what we found is that under the existing conditions, we're hovering around a level of service D, a kind of generally acceptable level, but on the border. And you'll say, well, but I drive San Pablo every day, as many of us do. I know it's congested. I'm waiting several cycles at lights. I'm having trouble getting through from one end to the other. That's true. That is part of the effect of what happens, but in general, it's still an acceptable overall level of service when you look at it in totality. It doesn't mean we don't have periods of congestion or spot areas of congestion. With the general plan, not the specific plan, but the general plan itself was going to cause a shift from a D to an E on certain segments and certain times of the day as we move through the corridor in Albany. That general plan reported that. What we wanted to look at is what's the difference with the specific plan now and the change in land use compared to the general plan? Would the specific plan result in anything getting worse, getting better, really any changes? What we found is that it's actually very similar. The directionality of traffic does change a little bit because of the change between residential and commercial activity, but in general, it doesn't change the service levels that are projected from the general plan to the specific plan. And I'll explain why that is in the next slide. The land use shift results in a change in not just land use, but also trip generation. And as we analyze this, and this is in the report and in the background materials that we prepared for this, in totality, when you look at the specific plan and the change in land use, we're going to have about 2,000 fewer daily trips on the road. And on a peak hour basis, which is really what we look at for traffic operations, in the morning, it's actually about the same number of vehicles. There's fewer inbound and more outbound because, again, with more housing, you have more people leaving and going to jobs in other cities and other locations. So you will have that shift of people leaving in the morning, but the net effect is you also have less coming in because you'll have less jobs, general plan compared to specific plan. So that's pretty much a wash in the morning. And in the afternoon, as commuters come back, and you have that shift in travel patterns again. The net effect, though, in terms of the numbers, is we have about 260 fewer PM peak hour trips than we would have had under the general plan as it was proposed. So we're seeing reductions in traffic, and those reductions are what's leading to the fact that we're not seeing changes in service levels as what was compared to what was projected in the general plan. The numbers are not that great on the grand scheme of things. There's a lot of traffic in the area, so we're incrementally changing things, but not to any great effect. And that's actually something that's good in a sense, because if we're achieving other objectives, we recognize that we're not changing things dramatically on the traffic operational front or on the CEQA front. Next slide. And lastly, I just wanted to talk a little bit about the policy implementation. I know this has come up in the discussions, and we were asked to touch upon it briefly in our transportation report, but the city has gone through several efforts over the past decade in terms of adopting an active transportation plan, having a complete streets plan, the circulation element from the general plan, and even the Alameda CTC San Pablo corridor project that they're looking at, which is underway. All of these have measures in place to talk about active transportation, which is how do we encourage more bicycle use? What kind of bicycle facilities? What kind of pedestrian facilities? How do we have good access to transit? Complete street plan, a street for everybody. So what does that mean? How do we allocate within the right of way? How do we allocate our lanes, our parking, our bicycle facilities, our pedestrian facilities, all of that? There's a lot of effort that's been put into thinking about that. The specific plan that we're talking about tonight doesn't change any of those. It takes advantage of them in the sense that we're going to have more people in the area. We are going to have to figure out how to accommodate those people and move them to transit, move them into their vehicles, circulation, transportation, and all of that goes in the area. But we're not actually taking away or deteriorating from anything that's been previously proposed. And that's good. It actually supports that, because having more people in the area supports all of these types of policies that the city has already adopted and been focused on. And I'll turn it back over to Jeannie now. And again, thanks for having me here this evening, and also available for questions and discussion as we move forward tonight.
Okay, great. Thank you, Mark and Susan. That concludes our presentation. And as Mark said, we're happy to answer any questions. Thank you.
Great, thanks. Staff, does that also conclude your presentation? Okay, great. Why don't we go ahead then and open it up for questions from commissioners to staff or the consultants. Commissioner Pilch.
Yes, thank you. Let's see. Regarding the sewer, sanitary sewer, there was a question, and I think the consultant addressed it about some studies pending on the sanitary sewer. Can you speak to that a little bit more? It sounds like, you know, your initial analysis was that there's capacity, but there's some further study being done. Is that the gist of it, or can you expand a little bit more?
Sure, I can speak to the sanitary sewer. Was there a specific question or area that?
Well, if there's any pending studies to be done, and this was noted by at least one member of the public too, can we really sign off on the sanitary sewer being the right size, or do we have to wait for the results of the pending study?
I see. Jean, maybe you have some thoughts here too. I think I'll go back to what I mentioned, that looking at the development as a whole, and speaking with Public Works at the city, understanding some of the improvements that have been happening not only around the city but in this area, there were no immediate red flags or pipes identified that would be impacted adversely by the development. Now, of course, the only way to truly understand from a parcel by parcel perspective is to understand the amount of flow existing in the pipes and then what each individual development would add. Looking globally, we did not see any issues. Public Works indicated that they have the sanitary sewer modeling capabilities that could hone in on that a little bit more. Maybe we had broken it down into 3 different sections that modeling consultant would look at. Again, that's just kind of another step that wouldn't necessarily be needed for the specific plan scope analysis. That is something the city offered to do, but wouldn't necessarily.
Okay, well, this might come. I'm not quite sure I understand your answer, but I'm looking at the Sandus report, page 11. There's 2 instances where it says that the there's 2 instances where it says results are pending. One says there's the results of a sewer analysis by the city of Albany, which take into account specific plan, are pending. And then there's a sewer consultant, blah, blah, blah. Results of this analysis are pending. So it just seems like staff might want to speak to that, or that might come up in public comment as well. It seems like, you know, perhaps we do have an idea that things are generally okay, but it does concern me that we have 2 sentences in which it says results are pending on studies. So does
Right.
you see my concern?
So just first of all, we're not asking you to make any decisions tonight. We're presenting the analysis that we've prepared to date. And you know, when we get to the CEQA document, that will include the final, well, the specific plan will include the infrastructure plan, and the CEQA document will evaluate potential impacts on these systems, including sewer. So it just so happens the city's going through this sewer master plan update. And so we opportunistically have the opportunity to look at more detailed corridor analysis. So far, Sandus did the aggregate, what's happening on the corridor, what are the potential impacts, but we actually provided the city's sewer modeler with a breakdown of potential development by these three quadrants, which are the sewer, the areas. I'm sorry, not a sewer expert, but the three actual areas physically that, so for example, if you have a big project on the top of the corridor, is that going to be a problem in terms of capacity? So we opportunistically are taking advantage of this. When we get information, we will add it to this analysis, and we're not anticipating it's going to change the results, but we will provide an update if it does.
Okay, that's what I
either
was
way.
looking. Yeah, that's what I was looking for. I just wanted clarification on that. Okay, very good. That makes sense. And then it was mentioned, or it was there's some concern also by a member of the public, and I caught it as well, about statements in the staff report about transportation, that the specific plan will support existing circulation policies and programs for all travel modes. And I believe, I think it's worded, maybe it could be worded better, but I think what this means to say, and I'm looking for clarification from staff, I think what this means to say is that, yes, we know we have our plan, we have an active transportation plan in place, we have a complete streets plan in place, but neither of these are fully implemented. And we have the ACTC work, which is ongoing, which is not even at a planning stage yet. And I think what is being said, and correct me if I'm wrong, is that all of these things support the specific plan. So correct me if I'm wrong about that. Would that be a fair statement?
Yes, I think that's right. And I'll make it more clear the next go around. But, so far we haven't identified any, for example, new bicycle on-street facilities or new, lane configurations or things like that. We're working with the ACTC corridor project process, and we're going to be helping to implement the complete streets plans, the active transportation plan through this process. Now, we have with the commission talked about things like bike parking requirements or the public realm on the sidewalk as part of the development. And we'll want to talk about incentives and ways we can get new development to help make those improvements along the frontage. So hopefully that clarifies a bit, but the distinction I'm making is between like the on-street facilities that we haven't identified new facilities for versus what may be happening in front of a new development project along the frontage.
Okay, thank you. And then finally, since it's been brought up by numerous members of the public, we've had numerous discussions here at the commission about parking. Can staff speak to parking not being included in the transportation analysis here? Is it not a requirement, or it seems conspicuously absent?
It's not a requirement. We have requirements. If you want to reference Government Code Section 65451, it's A2, and that's what is the reference point for all the statutory requirements that are before you tonight. Parking is not in that.
Okay, that explains that then. And I think, one more question, since it came up in the about pervious surfaces. It was stated that it's expected that we'll have more pervious surfaces, and there's a requirement, some requirement to have more pervious surfaces. Hopefully I'm getting this right. Does that mean that things like rain gardens, as were portrayed in one of your slides, it would be something that we might want to get into the specific plan, or that the city might want to consider as a something we want to include in as a general way of doing handling stormwater going forward?
Yes, I think that the comment about there being more pervious surfaces, you're right. It's that right now, if you look around the corridor, there's a lot of sites they kind of look like they're 100% impervious surfaces. And with those countywide C3 stormwater requirements that Susan mentioned, we can expect that I think a rule of thumb is about 4% of the site area ends up being at least impervious. Doesn't sound like that much, but it's an improvement over what you've got now. In terms of the swale that was shown in the picture that was actually from El Cerrito, which has they have a whole stormwater green infrastructure master plan. So that's on the public right of way or on the sidewalk. We expect private sites need to treat their stormwater on site, but the city could, as a policy measure, look at green infrastructure on the sidewalk on the public right of way.
Okay, so we don't necessarily have to make that part of the specific plan, but we could.
Right.
Okay. All right. Thank you. That does it for my questions. Thanks.
Great, thank you. Commissioner Momin, I think you had, are you still there? Oh, there you are. My screen's moved around. Commissioner Momin.
Thank you. Yeah, thank you for the presentation and background analysis. It was very informative in understanding the current status of various utilities and the future needs. I don't have too many comments, just a quick, not too many questions, but a quick one question and one quick comment on the structure of the staff report summary. It was very useful to have that summary, but I think it would have been really useful if the existing and potential or proposed policies were kind of separated. So it would have been helpful to understand the impact on the infrastructure, because it is all combined. We don't know which one is existing, which one is proposed. And then also we don't know which one is mandatory and which one is optional. So it would have been helpful if it was classified as such. My question is about C3 MRP requirements. Under that, I think there is certain special project worksheet and LID treatment reduction credits applicable for the projects. And I think in order for the project to be eligible for that, it has to be either TOD or have certain density and things like that. So do you think considering that specific plan properties would be mostly TODs or high density project, would all of them be exempt from these requirements? I don't know how this LID treatment reduction credits work. Does it like reduce the requirements, or how does it work basically?
I don't have a great response on the LID. I know we've talked about it among commissioners, and I know some commissioners might have more information than I do about low impact development specifically. On the C3 side, if you do have a very small project, it can be exempt from these requirements. But when we've got even our project sites that are about 10,000 square feet, we can expect them to have at least stormwater planters and some level of stormwater management requirement.
Okay, so basically it is safe to assume that they would invariably reduce impermeable surfaces from what we have currently.
Yes, and we've been talking about detailed zoning, and that's something that we can talk about in terms of if there's an interest in having a proportion of the open space that's required to be green and landscaped and irrigated or things like that. We haven't gotten into that level of detail, but certainly something we could consider.
Okay. And then one small question about the reduction of commercial area. We are still considering the land use portion, in which we are still not completely decided whether we want to make the ground floor commercial required or not. And so what have you assumed in calculating those build outs and their impact on trip generation? How would that be substantial if all development properties have commercial development on ground floor?
I could pull up the staff report from May that included a methodology for build out where we created these prototypes, and that meant we assumed townhomes and residential developments fronting Keynes and Adams. We assumed higher density ground floor retail with residential above on, well, all within the nodes. And we did assume that there could be some residential only sites on San Pablo. I can pull it up while we're talking. And that's how we got to about 45,000 square feet of commercial development. All of that was assumed to be on the ground floor. There was no prototype for an 100% commercial project, for example.
Okay. And if that happens as an extreme case, would that be a major impact on your current assumptions?
In terms of the CEQA analysis?
In terms of trip generation and impact on the level of service or VMP.
Maybe Mark can respond about how much sort of movement there would be if, say, the rule of thumb, if commercial development was, I don't know, 10,000 square feet more or less.
Yeah, it's not a, excuse me, it's not a linear relationship like that. But in our report, we actually have what the trip rates are. So if you start increasing commercial development, you could see that it generates, almost 40 trips per 1,000 square foot on a daily basis. That's on the retail side. On the office side, it's more like 10 trips per 1,000 square feet, and less than, it's about 10% of that in the peak hour. So you can start, if you look at the table, you can start moving things up and down to see where things balance out. In general, though, we're not going to see a lot of change if we start increasing the commercial and reducing the housing, or the ratios of what we're seeing here compared to what was in the prior general plan. It would take a lot of shift to really change the outcome and the effect on the transportation analysis.
Sure.
And that's actually from an environmental perspective, certainly, because we're in the high capacity transit corridor and the accessibility to both AC Transit and to BART. On the operational side, the one thing that is really important to consider is if we start intensifying the commercial, and that started to grow outside of CEQA, which is, parking is not a CEQA issue, it's not an environmental issue, but it is operational, then how you deal with parking and accommodation and localized circulation would have to be thought of a bit differently, compared to having as much housing. So there's trade-offs in all of this, is what I'm saying.
Thank you. Yeah, that's all I have to ask.
Okay, great, thanks. I think Commissioner McLeod, you're up next. We'll go with you. Commissioner, you're on mute.
Sorry.
Still on mute.
You're on mute.
Sorry, pressed it. I tried pressing. Okay, there we go. Is that better? Yeah, sorry. Thanks for your presentations, everyone. Just some first quick questions about the water service. It sounds like from what I read, it's a mix of types of pipe and sizes. And I think I heard it was said that the pipes are mostly 4 inches along the corridor. And then is there a timetable that EB Mud has come up with for replacing that? Because I think you said that it wouldn't, the 4-inch pipes would not support sprinkler systems for larger developments. So that could be a key block to some development. And I just wanted to EB Mud had come up with a timetable for that.
So I can pull up what information I was provided. So the 4-inch water line in San Pablo Avenue, and there's actually 2 water lines in San Pablo. The one on the south side is larger. That's an 8-inch line. And then along the north side of San Pablo Avenue, there's a 4-inch water line. So the 4-inch water line is the one that caught our eye just based on the smaller size and the age of it. What East Bay Mud told us was that there's a water line improvement project in the planning stage. So they are planning it out. And they indicated that the line is planned to be upsized to 8-inch from Harrison Street to the Alameda Contra Costa County line. So that would basically include the full extent of San Pablo Avenue within the city of Albany. And part of that line actually is currently under the sidewalk. So when they upsize it and replace it, they'll move it from under the sidewalk into the roadway. They did not provide a timeline other than it is in the planning stage. So they're moving forward with it, but it's in the earlier stages of the process.
So maybe it would happen within 5 to 8 years or something, or, I mean.
I would say most likely faster than that, because what they told me about the other 4-inch line that I mentioned, which is in Haynes Avenue, is they said there's no current plans for replacement of that line. However, they do know that there's failures occurring in that water line, and they have a 5-year timeline estimate for replacing the 4-inch line in Haynes. So they have a 5-year timeline for that, and it's not in the planning stages yet. So I would imagine,
Okay.
but I would imagine the San Pablo line, because it's in the planning stage, would be less than 5 years.
And is there any plan, there's some discussion about gray water or not, or reusing recycled water. And is there any plan by EB Mud to extend their recycled water line along San Pablo or into the rest of Albany? Because I think it ends right now at, where did it say it? Harrison or Buchanan or somewhere along our southern border, the current line?
So we did touch upon recycled water. I'm looking through our write-up real quick. It says there are portions of the city that fall within the project limits for East Bay Mud's recycled water program. So there's portions of the city of Albany that present opportunities to further implement the expansion of the recycled water pipelines. East Bay Mud has partnered with the city to install lines on Buchanan Street from Pierce to San Pablo Avenue. So it sounds like there is some infrastructure plans close to the corridor. It says recycled water use. It requires a separate plumbing system to supply the reclaimed water. So it sounds like it's making its way towards the corridor, but we have not heard of any specific plans beyond what they mentioned about Buchanan Street from Pierce to San Pablo.
Yeah, could we follow up? And it would be good to know if there is some way to bring that recycled water supply along San Pablo Avenue. I know when it gets to a building level, you would have to have a second plumbing system to supply that into the building. It wouldn't come through one same as the other pipes. But if the main pipes aren't there, then this is just a moot discussion about recycled water, and it won't have any impact on reducing water use along the whole corridor, or even in the rest of the city for that matter. So, if EB Mud is going to be digging up the whole corridor to provide an 8-inch line, at least on one side, why can't we extend that recycled pipe at the same time and make it accessible at least to one side of the street, and then somehow maybe we can figure out how to get it to the other side of the street later. That was one question. I guess my other question is more transportation related. And so the gist I'm getting is that overall, we're not making anything worse by what we're doing. And that's kind of what the overall conclusion is here. But at the same time, I don't see how we are identifying any way to make it better. So I would appreciate discussion on how we can make it better at, not just we're not making it worse. I mean, that's, for me, that's not really a way to approach problems or situations. It's really, how do we make it better, and how do we mitigate vehicle miles traveled? What can we do as a city to do that? And, achieve our climate action goals, reduce congestion, make it literally a more pedestrian friendly environment, et cetera. So maybe that's a question for the transportation planner. My understanding is we're not making bicycle facilities worse, because we don't have any bicycle facilities on San Pablo except for that one section in the very southern end. So, I mean, the other observation I have is that the complete streets plan that we have for San Pablo is basically obsolete. It's too old, out of date. Our active transportation plan is way overdue for revision, updating. So, it's our opportunity to make this better, not just say we're not making it worse. So maybe the transportation planner could comment on that, please.
I'll start off on a response on that. So I understand what you're saying, and I guess the response is twofold. One is, in the specific plan analysis, what we've been asked to look at this point is a comparison to the general plan analysis. What's the net effect of the change? Would we wind up with more impacts, fewer impacts, or roughly the same? So it's a straight comparison of environmental impacts and trying to keep that in an apples to apples realm. But your question really goes into something else, which is, in the specific plan itself, can we do better? It's not just how does this compare to the general plan, but how can we kick it up a notch? And I would suggest that that's a valid point, but also one that's taken up through things like the updates to the policies or the active transportation plan or the other ongoing programs that deal specifically with complete streets and active transportation and all of that. If that's the direction in terms of, hey, let's do that and fold it into the specific plan, that's different direction than what we've had, I think, to date, at least from what's been asked of our charge. But I would say that there's definitely, the framework is in place. The documents and the policies that the city has as tools right now lay a very good foundation and a good groundwork to do that work. And so it's not a complete answer in terms of this is what the specific plan is doing to address those concerns. It's just providing the context of where we are in the framework of what we've done and where we go. So I'll turn it over to Jean to continue.
And just to add on to that, the city is implementing portions of the Complete Streets Plan and is coordinating with the county on the San Pablo corridor project. So although there are certain options in the Complete Streets that are not being pursued, there are aspects of those plans that we're continuing with that aren't being implemented now, and that includes bicycle routes on Canes and on Adams. It includes hawk signals. It includes closing the gap between the San Pablo Avenue cycle track in front of Sprouts to the Buchanan Bikeway. So there's many aspects of those plans that we anticipate implementing or help to implement through these projects that may ensue as a result of the specific plan. So for example, we've talked about this, trying to connect development projects with objective improvements along the frontage. So you may be responsible for a certain improvement or putting money into a fund to help make that improvement. Likewise, that ACTC San Pablo Avenue corridor study is looking at the potential for dedicated transit or bike facilities on San Pablo, and certainly looking at transit improvements to improve reliability of AC transit on the corridor.
Yeah, I appreciate all that. And I do understand there are other frameworks within the city for doing all these things.
I just want to add one thing. I mean, generally speaking, infrastructure projects of that scale are typically included in the capital improvements program, which is administered through the Public Works Department. And that goes through regular review of the city council. And so that's typically how implementation occurs, not necessarily through, you know, a specific plan like this where we're looking at zoning standards.
Yeah, I guess my point is that we can do a lot better. And it wouldn't be just we're not making it, it's more or less the same, a wash. Or I think we could actually do better by implementing active transportation policies through these other mechanisms. And so that's it for now. Thank you.
Thanks. Commissioner Donaldson.
Yeah, there. Yes, thanks. Chair Waddy, do we gonna have a period later for comments? I have some comments, but I think right now we're on questions only. Is that correct?
Yeah, we're trying to just stay with questions, and we'll go to public comment and we'll come back for discussion.
My notes and things, and I kind of want to go back to Mohammed's question about the C3 and follow up on that, the C3 requirements. The Sandus report says that the C3 requirements are triggered when you're both, even when you're replacing impervious surfaces. And I wonder if that's really true. And I would like a clarification on that. My concern is, in a way, that the C3 requirements might not be triggered here in Albany under this plan because our parcels are so small. And there's so much already paved land, so much impervious surfaces. And I think that 540 San Pablo project that was we just recently approved, exempted itself or was exempted from the C3 requirements. I may be wrong on that, but they didn't have a C3 plan in there, maybe because they were adding pervious surfaces. It is much easier for them, but I want to clarify that C3 does apply if you have over 10,000 square feet, and even if you're replacing impervious surfaces.
Yes, that's correct. And
okay,
even though it's a project-specific matter, the project at 540 San Pablo will have to demonstrate compliance with C3, and they will be required to submit their stormwater calculations and plans as part of the building permit submittal.
Okay, that's good. Thank you.
Great. Commissioner Momin.
Yeah, I have a question in continuation with Commissioner McLeod's question regarding possibility of improving traffic conditions. I understand that transportation planners assume some guidelines when calculating the trip demands for the projects within a half-mile of BART station, and so they have assumed already reduced trips. I'm wondering what relationship that has with the parking standards that we are considering. What kind of whether there is any relationship between the two or not, and if there is, what standards have you considered for that calculation?
Okay, I'll start and then pass it back to Jean on this. With respect to transportation analysis, it's strictly based on vehicle trip counts, not parking estimates. And we did take into account the proximity to transit. There is what we call multimodal reductions built into the trip generation assumptions. That was similar to what was done in the general plan analysis, and similar to what has been applied here. But again, we haven't looked at, for our work specifically, the parking ratios and standards. I will say one of the things that I find really intriguing and exciting about the specific plan is the opportunity. And when I say opportunity, it's because it's so proximate to BART and to the level of bus transit that exists and that's coming on San Pablo Avenue through this corridor, that the opportunity to do really good, high quality transit-oriented development is strong. And in order to enact that and make it effective and have true TOD and have those nodes of TOD built around transit and transit centers, you don't want to over provide parking because it's like a disincentive. So the two actually go hand in hand, that you have to think about right sizing the amount of parking that you have to accommodate the needs of the development that's there, but also making sure that you're not discouraging or disincentivizing the use of transit that's nearby. And a lot of TOD plans are very strict on how much parking, or having parking maximums instead of parking minimums. That's very common throughout the Bay Area and throughout the nation, actually. And so that's something that really needs to be well thought out to make sure that the TOD aspects of this are reinforced and supported, so that all of it works hand in hand. And I'll pass it back to staff.
Great. Was that all of your question, Commissioner Moman?
Yeah, thank you.
Okay, great. Any other questions from commissioners before we go ahead and open it up to public comment? Okay, great. Then we will go ahead now and open it up for public comment. So for members of the public tuning in, now is your chance to provide public comment. Each speaker will have 3 minutes to speak before the commission. So now is your time to get in the queue and raise your hand if you'd like to speak. I'll turn it over to staff to manage the queue.
Sure. Right now we have 2 hands raised. So the first speaker is Nick Peterson. Nick, you have 3 minutes.
Great, thank you very much. So it's very exciting to see this plan proceed. Oh, my name's Nick Peterson. I'm a community member for the past 30 years. I've lived my entire life in the Bay Area. I also sit on the Climate Action Committee, run the Climate Action Coalition in Albany. So I have a strong concern about climate. I'm only speaking as a private citizen now. This is really exciting. And I think there's something the traffic engineer said that is just pivotal here, and which speaks to what we're trying to create and that we're designing for the next 50 years, not the last 50 years. The last 50 years is killing us, and we need to change what we do in planning. And that's what this corridor is about. It's a high quality transit corridor development plan. And in that sense, the focus used to be, if I heard him right, he said it used to be on the impact to the driver. Now, the focus is the driver's impact on the community and the environment, which means fewer parking spaces, fewer drivers, less impact, better plan. So this is a complete reversal 180 from what was happening the last time major planning processes were going on for this corridor. And you can even think back to when it was being used with horse and buggies and was going to automobile vehicles. The whole idea was driver, 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 driver. So I totally applaud that. I think we need to focus more on active transportation, especially bike, electric bike. I think that's more and more used. Just today, I saw many, school was let out and there were many parents with cargo bikes with little kids on the back, very many. And this is what's going to happen in the future. So I feel acquiescing to old thinking and feeling we have to, consider parking issues over everything or as paramount is a problem. I also understand that this was an analysis traffic-wise to the general plan requirements versus the special plan, and that there really isn't a change. And I appreciate Commissioner McLeod's comments that we should do better. Well, better depends on who you're talking about. If you're a car driver that wants access to everything, it's actually going to be worse if we do better. Because better is make it harder to just rip around in a gas powered car wherever you want, when you want, and park it wherever you want, when you want. So if we're changing that and we're saying now using that mode of transportation isn't going to be as wonderful as it was, you're making it worse. And I think that's totally fine. I think it's totally fine to make a method of transportation that is destroying the environment difficult to use and making other ones that we have planned the whole city around better. So I strongly applaud that, and I think we should do it. Thank you.
Okay, the next speaker is Brian Martin. Brian, you have 3 minutes.
Great, thank you. I'm Brian Martin, a resident of the 600 block of Adams Street. I had a series of questions I was hoping could be answered, addressed. Can Planning and Zoning Commission require undergrounding of overhead utility wires on side streets adjacent to large developments? That was brought up by one of the consultants, and that would be wonderful if true, I think. The 6-inch sewer line on Adams and Keynes, my question written that I haven't heard answered was, would the San Pablo Avenue Specific Plan developments sewage ever flow into those? And if yes, would they be sufficient to handle that? Then also, we're told to expect a significant drop in trips, even though the specific plan calls for commercial along most, if not all of it, and increases housing dramatically compared to the general plan, and that this decrease is because there are fewer jobs and smaller square footage for businesses under the specific plan. It's still really confusing to me. I don't see how that could possibly be. So my question is, what are at least 5 examples of businesses today, or at least a few, that have a large footprint on San Pablo Avenue today with lots of jobs that when redeveloped to mixed use would have a smaller commercial footprint and fewer jobs under the specific plan as was claimed by the consultant? And how does a drop in trips lead to the report's result that the traffic near my home between Garfield and Pomona will experience, quote, unacceptable traffic? More pervious surfaces. I had a question about that. I've heard that this is the trend in the Bay Area, but just last year we built an ADU in Albany and we're surprised to discover that we needed to pump uphill from the ADU all stormwater from it into the street, which required installing a costly pump and trenched pipes to a cachement in the front yard and cuts in the curb. Does the Planning and Zoning Commission have the ability to change requirements on stormwater to make keeping stormwater on site a possibility for any size development? And then finally, impacts on transportation infrastructure. Seemed very odd to me that the report did not address traffic impacts on side streets for people seeking parking and from developments that the city allows to put driveways onto side streets. Also odd that it did not address impacts to non-car transportation. As resident Clay Larson pointed out in written comment, the specific plan is not limited to matters relevant to CEQA. Is there a reason it appears to have been limited to CEQA issues? Please clarify why this is and how effects on parking on side street traffic and alternative modes of transportation can be factored into the specific plan. Thank you.
Are there any other speakers, staff?
Yes, we have one more
Okay.
hand that just was raised.
Great.
Okay.
And just to other members of the public, now is your last chance to go ahead and get in the queue and raise your hand if you'd like to speak following this gentleman.
Next speaker is Ed Fields. You have 3 minutes.
Yes, good evening. I felt the infrastructure report was rather cursory. And I'll give a simple example. I mean, I can see the Sonic and AT&T fiber optic internet connections that are available on my block. And I can't imagine, for example, take the bowling alley as a typical type of project where there'd be 200 additional connections, unless you're assuming that the market pressure would cause one of those companies to add additional fiber optic lines, for example. And what would happen if they chose not to? On the water and sewage capacity, it seems to me that an engineer, an architect, somebody would say, well, if we build 100 units, we need the equivalent of an additional 2-inch, 4-inch pipe for water or for sewage. And if we build 1,000 more units or more, what additional capacity we need, and is that capacity available? To me, that's what the report should look like. Not just simply, it's there, but we're pending reports that we don't know if it's there. As far as traffic goes, I apologize, I've not read the report, but it's not clear to me, and I think Brian Martin was touching on this, if you replace commercial development that's existing now, which has relatively small numbers of employees, and where customers come and go throughout the day, if you replace that with a smaller commercial footprint, I get it, and a large residential footprint, why there wouldn't be more AM and PM peak hour trips generated by those new residents coming and going to work. And I agree with a lot of what Nick Peterson said. We should be encouraging the new residents not to drive or discouraging them from driving, however you want to put it. And we would also hope that the existing employees and customers are using alternate modes of transportation and public transportation. So it's not clear to me how, if you add, 1,000 or more units with 2 adults per unit or whatever the typical number you assume is, that you wouldn't expect more AM and PM peak trips to be generated. I mean, the businesses that are there now are not supermarkets. You're not removing a supermarket and putting in a much smaller footprint business. You're removing, assuming auto repair shop would go away or something like that. And they probably don't generate a lot of AM, PM trips. Thank you.
Thank you. Is that our last speaker in the queue?
Yeah, I don't see any more hands raised at this time.
Okay, great. This is the last and final call for members of the public. If you wish to speak, please raise your hand. Seeing none, we will go ahead and close public comment and turn it back to the commission for discussion. Would any commissioner like to kick things off? Commissioner Momin.
Thank you. Yeah, so, I think from the infrastructure analysis and the discussion, I'm kind of getting a sense that overall there is enough capacity, the infrastructure to meet the demands that would be generated by the specific plan future development, and the improvements are being proposed and the study is being done if there is need for upgrades. I think what is important for me is sustainability. The issues that we are looking at, are the ones where the future development would have biggest impact, a real impact on the environment, and that's where we should, focus our attention to. We made sustainability as one of the guiding principles in our land use policies recently. And so we should look at the strategies that would really, make these developments sustainable. We have a low impact development policy for stormwater management, but we should look at more such green strategies that would make, all other environmental aspects like water, green, energy, sewer, and all other, aspects more sustainable, and it will make the overall San Pablo specific, plan development overall low impact development. Regarding the existing green strategies, the report has assumed some, strategies that in order to, assessing their future needs, but it is not immediately clear which programs are mandatory and which are optional. And then city also has some sustainable policy requirements under various codes. So it would be useful to prepare, a summary of existing green strategies covered under various programs and various codes, and then classify them into mandatory and optional. And then we can evaluate the real impact of these strategies and decide which strategies could be enhanced, which strategies could be made mandatory or incentivized, and which strategies could be proposed. And then regarding the proposed strategies, to start with, I think we should make a minimum threshold for lead rating or green point rated system mandatory. It is a norm, to have such green building standards in large scale development projects like ours. And so we can consider, a minimum of lead silver or gold, or at least 75 plus points of green rated system as a kind of a requirement for these projects. And then regarding the different systems, it is kind of good to know that regarding the stormwater, and it's good to know that we already have 90% of our sites impervious, and so it's kind of good to know that the impact of this development would not be substantial on storm drainage capacity. But I think we should aim to reduce the environmental impact, not just on capacity, but reduce the stormwater quantity and improve the runoff quality. So we should aggressively implement on-site stormwater management, bioretentions, bioswales, and flow-through planters, and incentivize increased tree cover and ground cover, and more permeable surfaces, and so on. And then regarding water supply, this is one area where there would be a big impact. And I understand from the report that EPMUD is already doing some upgrades. But water supply as such is going to be a matter of concern in near future, and so we should really work on ways to conserve more water. We should explore. We talked about Commissioner McLeod also mentioned, asked about that EPMUD has grey water, recycled water lines up to certain in area of Albany, and so it would be great if they can extend those lines along the whole stretch of San Pablo Avenue. But I think we should explore making on-site grey water recycling and reuse a requirement. And we should also incentivize rainwater collection and use. And we should also look at the current existing domestic and irrigation water policies and explore if they can be mandatory. And then regarding the sewer, it is kind of not shocking, but concerning that the future development is going to add about 400,000 gallons per day of sewer demand on the existing infrastructure. So I think in that regard also, grey water recycling could be really helpful. And then for energy, we should explore making PVs, solar hot water, and all electric building mandatory requirements up to a certain level. And then it would be useful to have some cost benefit analysis of these strategies. So it would help us in deciding which strategies could be mandatory. If they are too expensive, becomes too big constraints for the developers, then we'll have to think about them also, or we can go with some incentives along with them. But we should really make big efforts on including sustainable strategies in the specific plan requirements as mandatory requirements. And we can also link them with community benefits in return to height increase and other concessions that we are considering as part of density bonus also. And then lastly, we should really reward if any project is going to be proposed as a net zero water or net zero energy project. We would be lucky if we get some. That's all I have to say.
Great, thank you. Commissioner Pilch.
Yeah, thank you. Well, first I'll say that first I want to strongly support Commissioner Momin's ideas there on advancing green ideas, green infrastructure. And in particular, he called for a cost-benefit analysis of these items. And I think that's very key. And because although we certainly want to be advancing green infrastructure, we also want to encourage development, encourage housing development. So if our requirements are too stringent, or will cause developments to not pencil out and no one will come and build in Albany, then that will not be a good outcome. So we do need to see the cost benefit. But one area where I'm sure there probably is a small cost and a great benefit is in the pervious services. Considering that most projects usually destroy the sidewalk and have to have a rebuild, I would say that including rain gardens, including a requirement that the sidewalks be rebuilt with rain gardens that accept the runoff and filtered through a pervious surface should be one of the things that we require, and should not be a big ask for the developer or the city, whoever ends up paying for it. And I think there are grant programs. El Cerrito implemented its rain gardens through grant programs. So I want to definitely support that, but definitely support the idea that Commissioner Roman is talking about. So a couple other things. I was surprised to see the analysis of the transportation using level of service. I think the reason that was done is just to introduce us to the fact that we don't use level of service anymore. But I would just strike that analysis from the plan, because it's not what we use anymore. And I don't want people to think that we are using that as a metric. Because as was already said by certain folks, that we want the effect of driving to be counted, not the effect on drivers. And finally, just two overarching. I accept the rest of the analyses, and thank you for all the reports. Two things I want to say. I really think that we should consider the entire entire southern part of the city from Solano south to be a node, rather than excluding part of that, since I think that we really want to have a lot of development there, which is really the city center part. And I feel very, very strongly that we need to put this whole thing through an economic analysis. We need to have an independent, disinterested economic analysis firm vet this to make sure that what we've done will actually pencil out for developers, that will actually cause housing development. The situation is very fluid. The state is changing laws all the time. El Cerrito is actually redoing their specific plan. That's in the works, and Berkeley will likely do a specific plan. So we need to be ahead of all that and make sure that there is economic incentives for developers to come and build in Albany with all our constraints. Otherwise, we will not have otherwise, all this work will be for naught. Our development of housing on San Pablo Avenue has been moribund for tens of years, and that's got to change. And we've got to have very strong evidence that what we've done will actually change that. And that concludes my. I just want to second the idea about making sure we get, if possible, get the recycled water infrastructure down San Pablo. I mean, that would be an awesome thing. I know that's more of a complicated thing, but I want to support that as well. So thank you very much.
Thanks. Commissioner Donaldson.
Yes, thanks, thanks. Let's see. I'll make some comments here. Let's see, regarding the Sandus report, a couple of thoughts. I already talked about the C3 issues. I wondered about that. I think the Sandus report does need more regarding the low impact development, the LID work. It seems that it was kind of set aside because there'd be a reduction in projected runoff. So they said you aren't going to need to have low impact development. But it also notes that their gutter flows along San Pablo Avenue are there. That's the main drainage channel for that watershed in a way. So I think it should talk about rain gardens and hydro modifications. I'll refer to the comments that we received from Fred Neal. And I think it should also consider the fact that, and actually what Commissioner Pilch has been talking about too, but it should also consider the fact that Caltrans is a state highway, and we'd have to work with Caltrans on any of that. So where El Cerrito can charge forward on that, it's more difficult, would be much more difficult for us to do. I support that, and I think it should be in the plan, and I think this report should discuss it more carefully. With respect to water, I read the comments we had from Fred Neal, and I support those comments. I'll make one thought about recycled water. I think it's aimed for the Ohlone Greenway. The Ohlone Greenway was, when it was re-landscaped some years ago, it was all done with purple pipe in anticipation of that recycled water project coming up here. It's getting closer, and I thought I read somewhere that EBMUD was looking to the federal infrastructure program for some funding to move that project forward. So I think that's something that should be looked at or researched more. I may be wrong on that, but it should be researched more for our report here. And maybe it would be possible to actually have a recycled water line going down San Pablo Avenue if they have the capacity for it. And if it could be done, it'd be a great benefit to new development along San Pablo. Energy and telecommunications. I'd like to see more in the report on undergrounding and how that might work, pragmatically speaking, with new projects that come our way. I don't recall that the 540 San Pablo Avenue project that we just recently approved did do anything with the utilities on Adams Street, on the Adams Street frontage. Not even sure what overhead power poles are there. But if there is a possible for connection there between new development and undergrounding the utilities along Keynes, Adams, or San Pablo, when new development goes in, I think that's something that we should look at, and I'd like to see this report kind of amplify on that a little bit. Let's see, Commissioner McLeod, or I think it was commented about cell phone coverage, or maybe it was one of our commenters. I think Ed did. My question also had to do with, I think this report should identify where we have cell phone towers along the San Pablo corridor, because if there is new development and it's higher rise, those towers, those cell phone antennas are going to have to be raised, modified, moved, or whatever. And I think that's especially the one in the northern end of the corridor behind the dental office. I think that one, I'd really like to know what that might happen there and how that might be an issue or not if those sites develop when we're looking at the in terms of the specific plan. Let's see, regarding the traffic report, it was interesting and in fact kind of surprising for me to see the numbers that we talked about in May actually showing up in an analysis, the 1,160 units. I think I said at the time, I thought that was too high. And I still think that. And then the drop in commercial area, it really hadn't sunk into me how significant that would be. And this analysis shows it. I can still believe that we shouldn't be trying to do everything that the RENA requires on San Pablo Avenue. And you've heard me say that before, and I still hold that position. But that being said, I just want to comment. It's interesting to see how that gets used in the analysis and the effects it had. I think the traffic session should use some discussion of the San Pablo Buchanan Complete Streets Plan. It referenced that the segment being implemented now are some intersection improvements, crosswalk improvements, I think, between Washington and Brighton, and an area between Washington and Brighton. And my question is that all we're doing there? And how is that being phased in? What other kind of improvements that are in the Complete Streets Plan are likely to happen? Is the plan obsolete, as Commissioner McLeod says? I'd like to see more discussion on its status. I think it's a really important thing. If we're doing a specific plan for the San Pablo corridor, that Complete Streets Plan is really needs to be in that report and needs to be discussed in that report. Let's see. I know it was interesting to me that bike parking was delineated in a very specific way, but auto parking was completely ignored, and we've been completely ignoring it. And I continue to believe that is a serious mistake. I think it's a fatal flaw as this plan's moving forward. And I agree with the comments that Clay Larson made to that extent. We need to right size the parking, as Mark Spencer said, the phrase he used just a little while ago. And we're not even addressing parking. We're ignoring it completely. It was interesting to me that Mark's report used the congestion management plan impact analysis technical guidance, which I wasn't familiar with. Actually, I've not read it, don't have it. But it noted that for transit-oriented development in a location such as this, in Albany, that you could reduce the mode share by 28%. So you could reduce the amount of cars on the road, or the trips taken by auto, by 28%. That is a lot. And I think that's probably I assume it's realistic. I assume that it's been carefully calculated. And I think that is the ultimate deduction you're going to get from transit-oriented development. I can remain convinced that cars are not going to disappear, not in my lifetime, and which isn't much longer, and not in younger people's lifetimes here either. They're going to be around, and we need to plan for them, and we need to plan where to park them. And that vehicle miles traveled are going to drop. Car ownership may not drop, and we don't know that. So this is really interesting to me, that we're still going to have 70% of the trips, even in a transit-oriented development, are going to be auto trips. That's a way higher number than walking trips. It's a way higher number than transit trips. It's a way higher number than bicycle trips. And cars are going to be the dominant form of transportation. And this plan does nothing to address that so far. And I think it's deficient because it doesn't. Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner. Commissioner McLeod. Commissioner, you're still on mute.
Sorry. Yeah, thanks. Yeah, mostly I support the findings of the reports. I am a little bit concerned about the sanitary sewer. I think if there are studies pending, it would be great to see those or have more information. I mean, that would be a very big expense. I assume that's city expense to replace those. Big capital improvement project. So maybe that could be clarified. Who pays for those upgrades? Anne, do you know?
If you don't mind giving me just a minute, I'll be able to answer that.
Okay, yeah, no problem. Yeah, who pays for it is a big question. There were some good questions raised by our public commenters, capacity for internet, et cetera. I'm pretty sure that developers will not be able to provide attractive housing unless they have like top-notch internet capabilities. So I think it's in the developer's interest, it's in everyone's interest to have, top-notch connectivity and all that. I support a lot of Commissioner Moment's comments, especially about sustainability. We are planning for a sustainable future, and I think that applies to traffic, parking, et cetera, that we aren't planning necessarily for a static 28% mode shift to, non-driving. I think should be planning for a 65% mode shift at some point. There are other cities that have done it. Copenhagen has a 65% share of transit, walking, and biking. It can be done. It will be done at some point. It makes for much more livable cities, much better cities. It's also the reason I support more commercial development along the ground floor, along the whole corridor. It's because we want to give our residents the opportunity to walk and get what they need without getting in a car. And that's part of mode shift, is providing a sustainable urban environment that provides everything, goods and services that residents need. And beyond that, then other transit forms are available within a 10 or 15 minute walk or a 10 or 15 minute bike ride. I mean, that's the whole point. So that's high quality transit oriented development, and that's what I think we should be aiming here for. So it's not just about saying, okay, it's not making it worse than before or worse in comparison to our general plan. I think we want to make it better and, reduce our energy use, reduce water use. I agree with trying to retain as much stormwater on site. That's the best practice. Let it percolate into the ground, restore water tables. I know Albany is a little bit challenged with the type of soils we have in some areas or in parts of the city. But I think that's a good goal. So, it's really planning for sustainability, and just doing transit-oriented development, just providing more housing here is a key element of sustainability. It means people aren't driving in from the hinterlands, doing long commutes. They're coming closer to where jobs are, living where jobs are. I do support most of my fellow commissioners' comments. I disagree about parking. I think we should be minimizing parking to the maximum extent possible. That's maybe not the focus totally of our discussion tonight, but I don't think it's a fatal flaw. I respectfully disagree with Commissioner Donaldson. I think it's an attribute to reduce parking and provide other alternatives. So that's where the transportation planning comes into play with our active transportation plan and the potential upgrades done by ACTC. NACDO guidelines for bike lanes would say that on San Pablo, separated, protected bike facilities are required with the street with that traffic volume. That's a national accepted standard. And that's what we should be doing in Albany, giving people the option to get out of their cars, get on their bikes, travel safely within the city, parents, kids, everybody. And we need a complete connected set of protected bike lanes through the city that connects through to El Cerrito, through to Oakland, through Berkeley. So I support high density here. I think it's a very sustainable way to do it. I support also looking into green building systems or certifications such as LEED. I highly support that. I've been talking about that for a long time, and we seem to not be able to make much headway in adopting or even talking about things like that. But you know, whatever we can do to reduce the energy use in these buildings reduces the impacts on the environment, reduces the impacts on infrastructure. So that's a laudable goal, and I think that should be part of what we're planning for. I can't think of anything else at the moment, but that'll be it for now. Thank you.
I just want to go back and respond to your initial question related to the sewer infrastructure. And the short answer is that yes, it is our infrastructure. So we do upgrade it. We also collect fees as well as a sewer tax. In the context though of private development, those developers are required to pay for you know, the infrastructure that connects them onto the sewer lines.
All right, thank you.
Great, thanks. Well, I'm happy to just jump in and wrap things up here. I don't have a whole lot else to add. Great presentation, consultants, and great comments by staff or by fellow commissioners as well. I guess just the few minor points that I would just reaffirm, points that were brought up by others. Certainly, I too would support looking at opportunities, or at least providing a little more information on how through developing the specific plan, we can figure out a way to move towards undergrounding of future developments. And I think the important part is on the side streets. How does that really play in and sort of connect back into the more residential streets of Albany? I know that's a big lift. There have been bond measures in the past. This may not all fall on the shoulders, certainly, of the San Pablo plan, but I think it's an important discussion to have and a goal that we should be striving towards. Ultimately, I think there is a sustainability component to it of getting utilities underground, especially, you know, as we've had high winds this last week or future fires. I think there's just sort of a ongoing resiliency aspect to undergrounding utilities long term. I also, and maybe this is sort of like half question for staff, but I thought we had passed an ordinance previously mandating all electric in new construction. That is the case.
We got as far as getting it through commission. We had tentatively scheduled it for council review. That was in November of 2019. And within that window, the city of Berkeley faced a legal challenge. And so we were advised by our legal counsel to put our efforts on hold until that was resolved.
Got it. And that makes sense. And I don't know if the same sort of legal precariousness still applies, but certainly I do think as part of the San Pablo specific plan, looking at that and incorporating those policies, I think is a good policy. As I mentioned, when that ordinance was coming before us, I very much supported in new construction. Don't think there's a significant delta in cost for developers when you're building from the ground up to do all electric versus introducing gas. I think it's a much, much bigger burden on property owners who are doing remodels to have to switch, energy means. But for new construction, I think this is the place where we get our collective biggest bang for the buck and move towards those larger sustainability goals, especially with bigger projects, multi-unit projects. So I think that's a point that is I'd really like to see in the specific plan on that front. And then last point is also just in the sidewalks, again, liking to think through what are costs that developers would already need to be factoring into their pro formas when they're moving forward with a project. Things like rebuilding sidewalks is a very normal expense that most developers would think about. So how can we rebuild those smarter and better and with sort of ongoing sustainability and looking to the future in mind? So I would agree very much with Commissioner Pilch's comment on that about, looking at sort of the rain gardens or sort of a permeability or landscaping zone, sort of the street tree zone, all of those things. I think it's a nominal, if any, delta in cost for developers from what they're planning on paying for any house. I think sort of anytime we can get these win-wins of pushing people, or it's a very nominal increase in cost to what developers would already have to do is great. Because I do very much agree. We don't want to be putting so much in this that no one builds housing, because then we don't actually get to see any of these great plans and it's just a fancy book that we all put on the shelf. So I think it's really important that these plans are practical. My only concern about doing sort of this other additional economic analysis, and Commissioner Pilch, I absolutely hear your point on let's figure out a way that we can make sure that this is pragmatic. There's so much change that I think being able to run an analysis would truly be a snapshot in time, and just thinking about construction pricing right now and supply chain issues right now is a very different moment in time than 18 months from now, in terms of what 18 months from now, what somebody's pro forma might look like. So I think being able to capture and do these studies, thinking and knowing that development really takes, it's a 5+ year life cycle best case for somebody to start acquisition and go through building, and that's through the quickest of entitlement processes, that the economics today are going to be very different than when the plan is adopted and somebody actually decides to start looking at parcel acquisition or consolidation. So then getting that sweet spot and moment in time for running an economic analysis when we know the state is likely going to have another slew of housing bills next year and the following year. I think we kind of get trapped in this like analysis paralysis of I'm not sure how useful that would be. But if staff or the consultants can think of a way to get to that point, because I think we're all striving for that same balance point of introducing the right green infrastructure principles into the plan that are very forward looking, but balancing it with how do we also incentivize housing development, and like where is that sweet spot? How do we thread that needle? I don't have the answer to that, but I think that would just be my comment is, I want to make sure that all the goodies that we're putting into this plan that we hope to see in Albany are as cutting edge as we can push it while still not deterring housing development from happening. And wherever you all in your expertise feel like that sweet spot is I think that the place that I would like us when we come to a vote, that we would have some confidence that we're pushing it as far as we can, but we'll actually start seeing some projects. So that wraps up my comments. It looks like there are a couple of additional hands back up for commissioners. So we'll just loop back around. Commissioner Pilch.
Yeah, thank you. Since you mentioned it, I know that some things will be changing, but they'll be changing for all the cities. So my point was just that we need to compare with El Cerrito and Berkeley, and if Albany comes out at the bottom, then we're still going to be in the same place. And that's the sort of analysis that I think is important to do. But moving on from that, I was reminded that both Commissioner Moman and I were not on the commission when we did pass a new ordinance. We did some green building code work in 2020. So having that, if we do a cost benefit analysis or factoring that into upcoming presentations we have might be good, so that we have an idea of what we already have in place for some of those green building things. And then finally, I agree with Commissioner McLeod that ideally we'd have ground floor commercial or retail on the whole avenue. That would be the ideal. But again, that comes down to will it pencil out? And I think what we're seeing is that when, in places where they just try to force retail and commercial everywhere on the ground floor, some places remain empty. And so that's an economic thing that has to be weighed. Like, for example, there's I think everyone probably knows the Trader Joe's in Berkeley at the corner of MLK and University. The Trader Joe's does great, but there's a couple of retail, one or maybe two retail spaces next to it that I'm not sure they ever got rented out. And so, you just have to be careful about stuff like that. So I support incentives that we can have as much retail and commercial on the ground floor as possible. But it just might not work everywhere along our part of the avenue. And that was my quick follow-up. Thank you.
Thanks. Commissioner McLeod.
Yeah, I just wanted to follow up on the all-electric question. I think that is absolutely something we should be pursuing. And I know the City of Berkeley lawsuit was resolved in Berkeley's favor, at least the initial lawsuits. There may be appeals. But the basic idea is that if you're going to get to net zero or even close to net zero, your project has to be all electric. You cannot get to net zero if you're using natural gas in your project. Natural gas will always be a greenhouse gas, will always be polluting. And we can get to net zero, at least to using clean energy with all electric projects. So it's the only way to go really in terms of sustainability. And I also support the undergrounding of utilities, not just on our side streets, but I would say at all of Albany at some point. I know it's very expensive, but that's also sustainable, and also a question of, reliability and resilience, especially if we're going to have an earthquake at some point. We don't know when, but if there is a big earthquake, what I read in that EB mud report is that there's cast iron pipe and clay pipe, and an earthquake, that is all going to disintegrate. So, upgrading all that, undergrounding these utilities, it's all a plus if we can do it. So those are my final comments. Thank you.
Great, thanks. Any final comments? We've got 5 minutes to spare before our next hearing. We are doing great on time tonight. All right, I see no additional hands up from commissioners. So why don't we go ahead and conclude this item, which also adjourns our 5 p.m. special study session. Staff, did you have any comments? Maybe we'll take a 5-minute break before we reconvene for the 7 o'clock. Does that sound good for everyone?
That sounds perfect.
Great.
Okay, great. And just to confirm, we'll all just turn off video, but we'll just jump back on the same feed. Okay, great. So to the public, we're taking a 5-minute break and we will be back for the regular session at 7 p.m. Thanks. All right, it's just after 7, and it looks like we are all back. Why don't we go ahead and call the regular 7 p.m. Albany Planning and Zoning Commission meeting to order. And can we get roll call again?
Sure. Commissioner Donaldson,
Here.
Commissioner McLeod,
Here.
Commissioner Moman,
Here.
Commissioner Pilch,
Present.
Chair Waddy.
Here. Thank you. On to item 3 on our agenda, ex parte communications. Do any commissioners have any ex parte communications to disclose this evening? All right.
No.
Seeing unanimous head shaking no, we will move on to item 4 on our agenda, which is the consent calendar. The consent calendar items are considered to be routine and will be enacted by one motion. By approval of the consent calendar, staff recommendations will be adopted unless otherwise modified by the commission. There will be no separate discussion on these items unless a member of the commission or a member of the audience requests removal of these items from the consent calendar. We do have several items this evening. First up, we have item 4-1, Planning and Zoning Commission meeting minutes from September 22nd. Item 4-2, Planning and Zoning Commission meeting minutes from September 29th. Item 4-3, Planning Application 21-067, Design Review and Parking Reduction for a second-story addition at 1205 Portland. And planning item 4-4, Planning Application 21-052, Design Review for a 2-story addition at 1467 Portland. And lastly, item 4-5, this was continued from September 22nd, and this is Planning Application 21-058, Design Review for a second-story addition at 919 Ramona. And I think we maybe have a couple of recusals and maybe a couple items to pull off. Why don't we go ahead and start? Commissioner Donaldson.
Yeah, I need to recuse myself on 1205 Portland.
Okay. Commissioner Pilch.
Yeah, I am recused on 1467 if Portland, if I have that address right.
1467 Portland. Okay, great, Pilch. And Commissioner Moman.
Yeah, I have a correction to suggest in September 2022 meeting minutes on page 3, lines 11 and 12. It says Momin yes with no maximum under residential vehicle parking. It should be Momin yes with a maximum.
Okay. All right then. And with that, then it looks like no items are being pulled off. Why don't we go ahead and open it up for public comment on the consent calendar? Members of the public, now is your opportunity to raise your hand if you'd like to pull any of the items listed on the consent calendar just now off of the consent calendar. Staff, do we have any members of the public in the queue?
Yes, we have one speaker, David Asser now. You have 3 minutes to speak, starting now.
Did I understand correctly that you are addressing 919 Ramona tonight?
919 Ramona is on the consent calendar. Right now, this is public comment if you would like to pull one of these items off the consent calendar. So not for substantive discussion right now, but just now is your opportunity to tell us if you would not like this item approved otherwise.
Actually, and just to clarify, we're asking, and the applicant has asked for this matter to be continued. They did not get the story polls up in time, nor did they submit revisions based on commission comments from September. So right now, the project is effectively on hold, and we're asking the commission to table it indefinitely, and we'll resend postcards when it is ready to go.
Got it.
Thank
got
you.
it.
That concludes my comment.
Okay, great. Yeah, so that item is proposed for indefinite continuance on the consent calendar. Okay, great. Are there any other members of the public who wishes to pull any of these items off the consent calendar as recommended? All right, seeing none. Staff, do you also see none?
None, yeah.
Great, okay, we'll go ahead and close public comment on the consent calendar then and turn it back to commissioners. And let's see, since we've got several items and several continuances, why don't we take, what is the best way to do this tonight? Sorry, trying to get it all on one screen here. Let's see, 12.
Someone who doesn't need to recuse could move the consent calendar, and those of us who have to recuse.
We still do have a quorum. That's probably the easiest way. Why don't we go ahead of that? If we can have somebody make a motion to approve the consent calendar. Who can vote on all items. So Commissioner McLeod.
Yeah, I move that we approve the consent calendar, all items.
Great. And with the amendments recommended by Commissioner Moman on the minutes, do you accept that friendly
Yes.
amendment? Okay, great.
Adopting his changes.
Great. Do we have a second?
Second.
Okay, great. On that motion, noting a recusal from Commissioner Donaldson on 1205 Portland and a recusal on 1467 Portland from Commissioner Pilch. So we'll assume those votes. On that motion then, Commissioner Donaldson.
Yes, aye.
Commissioner Pilch.
Yes.
Commissioner Moman.
Yes.
Commissioner McLeod.
Yes.
And I vote yes as well. So those items are approved as voted on with the respective continuances. And let's see, we have story polls up on a couple of these, staff. Is that correct? Correct. So those with story polls, make sure to leave those up for the duration of the appeal period. Otherwise, those items have been enacted on as outlined on the consent calendar. With that, that moves us along on our agenda this evening onto item 5, announcements and communications. We do have one item 5-1, just informing the public that we will be canceling the October 27th Planning and Zoning Commission hearing. So everyone gets a little break around Halloween. That's great. And with that, we will move on to item 6 on the agenda, public comment. This is public comment for members of the public who wish to address the commission on matters that are not otherwise agendized this evening. So now is your time to get in the queue and raise your hand if any member of the public would like to address us on unrelated matters under the purview of the Planning Commission this evening. Staff, do you see any hands raised?
No hands raised.
All right. Seeing no public speakers, we will go ahead and close general public comment and move things along to possible action items for this evening. First up, we have item 7-1. This is planning application 21-7072, a design review, parking exception, and conditional use for a second story addition at 1019 Peralta. Staff.
Awesome, thank you. Once again, tonight we have design review, parking exception, and conditional use permit for a second story addition at 1019 Peralta. I'll do a quick presentation and then we're happy to answer any questions after the presentation. And I see the project applicant is also in the queue. Background on the property. The subject property is a 3,850 square foot lot with a 2-bedroom, 1-bathroom, 1,272 square foot house built in 1923. City records show the following minor work done to the property. Here's a street view of the property as it sits today. And project requests. The applicant is seeking design review for an 857 square foot second story addition. They're also seeking a parking exception to allow a second off-street parking space in the front yard, which is triggered by the proposed addition, and a conditional use permit lastly to vertically extend the existing non-conforming north wall to accommodate the second story construction. Altogether, this project scope would result in a 5-bedroom, 3-bathroom, 2,099 square foot home with a maximum height of 27 feet, 11 inches. Here's an existing elevation of the home. And here's the proposed elevation. You'll note the change in architecture style to craftsman in appearance with the new siding and a new garage door recessed into the bottom portion of the terrain. Exceptional design. Projects which exceed 8.45 FAR are subject to exceptional design as reviewed by the Planning and Zoning Commission. These exceptional design treatments include a new craftsman style for the home, fiber cement horizontal lap siding on the exterior of the home, relocating the existing garage under the home and establishing a new driveway via excavation, gable roof forms with decorative brackets under the eaves consistent with the craftsman style, wood fascia for all the roof forms, wood windows with fiberglass exterior cladding throughout the home, and a new wood deck at the rear of the in the rear yard. Average perimeter height. Pursuant to section 2024-050 floor area ratios of the Albany Municipal Code, the applicant is seeking to exempt the proposed lower level of the home from FAR calculations. What this means is for partially subterranean spaces of the home that have an average perimeter height of 5 feet or less, the area is excluded for purposes of calculating the FAR per the zoning code. The average perimeter height of the lower level of the home is proposed to be 3 foot 11 inches and thus has not been factored into the overall FAR calculations. And below this, you can see an excerpt which was included in your in the staff report detailing those calculations and how they're made. And then this is just an excerpt from taken straight from the code, detailing how those measurements are to be taken. Parking exception. There's an existing garage structure at the front of the property that actually encroaches into the public right of way. The applicant is proposing to demolish this garage and establish a new garage that is located under the main level of the home. As a result, this would provide a new driveway which measures 16 feet in length. Pursuant to section 2028-040A8 of the AMC, the second story addition does trigger an additional off-street parking space. Therefore, the applicant is seeking approval from the commission for a parking exception to allow parking in the front yard setback area. If the parking exception is approved by the commission, this would result in a total of 2 off-street parking spaces for the property. The findings for the parking exception were included as attachment 2 of the staff report. And just right here is an excerpt of the site survey. You'll see that the garage structure is located here at the front of the property. From the front property line to the porch face is a little over 16 feet. And by demolishing the garage, that would leave a driveway that would be a little bit over 16 feet in length. Conditional use permit. The side yard setback requirement for the R1 zoning district is 10% of lot width, or in this case, with the subject property, 3.5 feet. The existing north wall of the home is slightly non-conforming with current setback regulations and is located 3.33 feet from the property line, where 3.5 feet is required. The applicant is proposing to vertically extend the non-conforming north wall to accommodate the proposed second story addition. Pursuant to Table 2A of Section 2024-020 of the zoning code, a conditional use permit is required to vertically extend this north wall. The applicant is seeking approval from the Planning and Zoning Commission for the CUP to extend this wall. Staff has received 1 formal correspondence in support of the project, praising the thoughtful design. The project is categorically exempt from CEQA per section 15303. And with that, staff recommends that the Planning and Zoning Commission review and approve the proposed project subject to the findings and conditions of approval. And with that, staff is happy to answer any questions, and we have the applicant in the attendance as well. Thank you.
Great. And maybe before we open it for questions, does the project applicant have a presentation as well?
I don't know if they have a presentation prepared, but her hand is raised, so I can let her speak.
Sure. Why don't we go ahead and open it up to the project sponsor, and then we'll turn it back if there are questions for either from commissioners.
Okay, can you hear me?
Yes, we can. Thanks.
Great. Thank you so much. And great presentation, Christopher. I really appreciate that. So I don't have a presentation. Christopher covered, I think, the basics for you. I just wanted the opportunity to say hello and thank you all so much for your time and consideration of our project. My husband and I are really excited to raise our kids in the Albany area. We are so happy we finally found a home here. We've got 2 young kids. We love the neighborhood, the people we've met, the parks. And as our family is growing with kids and both of us working from home now to avoid costly commutes and spend more time with our kids, we do need more space. And that's why we're proposing this expansion. We also just wanted to apologize. You may have noticed there were some labeling errors. Originally, we intended to use the rooms as a family room and 4 bedrooms, but recognizing that the family room has a closet and we didn't want it to look as though we were hiding a bedroom. Last minute change to show it as a bedroom, ended up with 2 bedroom number 2s. So we apologize for that. And the last thing I'd just like to say is that, you know, we are certainly considering environmental concerns as something that's important and that we care a lot about. And specifically as a structural engineer, I find that one way that we can affect these concerns is to build resilient homes and buildings that are built out of quality materials and that will last through earthquakes. And so I'm designing this home to be kind of enhanced seismically. And we're also very carefully considering all building materials because we really want to make sure that this is a home that will last. So thank you so much for your time.
Great, thank you. With that, commissioners, does anyone have any questions for either staff or the project sponsor? Commissioner McLeod?
You're muted.
Sorry, bad night for that. Sorry, just a quick question for the applicant. Are you going to do an all-electric home? You have the opportunity to do so. I see you have a heat pump in the rear of the yard or behind the house, and so all electric.
No, they can hear us.
No, actually, we will get very efficient appliances, but I guess I personally feel that having some diversity in energy availability is important for when we have outages, and so we're definitely going to try to choose efficient appliances.
I have two quick questions. First, it looks like on the plans on the window schedules, you have identified, sorry, let me pull up my notes here, fiberglass with simulated divided lights. I was just hoping if you could clarify on whether that was planning on being sort of flat grills, three-dimensional, interior, exterior, spacer bar in between. Like if you could just share with me what your intent is on the type of simulated divided lights that you're planning for the windows.
Yeah, that's a great question. So Marvin, which is the manufacturer we've decided to go with, has a variety of different labels and names that they call it. And so their definition of simulated divided lights is not a full divided pane, and that the wood does not go all the way through and separate glass. You do have solid glass, but then there's wood, or there are dividers on the exterior and interior. So really it goes, you know, divider, glass, air, glass, divider, so that the dividers are, you know, you see that impact on the outside and the inside rather than just between the glass.
And then maybe just a follow-up question on that. I know with Marvin, there is the option to provide the spacer bar in between the panes of glass. Is that something that you guys are open to, if that were a condition?
We are open to it. We would certainly work with Marvin on that. From my understanding is that their Elevate series doesn't offer that option in their divided light.
Got it.
Simulate, yeah. So anyway, but if it's an option, we would certainly consider it.
Okay, thank you. And then my last question, and this might just be sort of a rendering issue, which I know renderings are not always 100% accurate here, but on the rendering, it shows that your trash recycling, compost, and all of that is just out in the sort of front setback area. I was just wondering what your intent is. Is it intended to be within the new garage location? Are you planning on building sort of a trash enclosure? If you could just share a little bit about what your thoughts are for that.
Yeah, I apologize. We should have rendered something. We intend to do more of an off-the-shelf trash enclosure in the front. We don't intend to have them exposed and open, but probably not in the garage as it's a narrow doorway.
Okay, great. Thank you. Those are my questions. Commissioner Momin.
Yeah, quick question to the staff. Is there any code requirement for like a maximum slope for parking?
Not in the zoning code that I'm aware of.
Okay.
Any other questions?
That's it I have. No.
Okay, great. Any other questions from any other commissioners before we go ahead and open up public comment? Seeing none. Why don't we go ahead then and open up public comment right now? So to members of the public, now is your opportunity to get in the queue, raise your hand if you would like to provide public comment on this project. Staff, do we have any members of the public who wish to speak?
We do have one speaker, Richard Weiss. Richard, you have 3 minutes to speak starting now.
Mute.
Richard, you're mute.
Can you hear me now? Okay. Sorry. Hello, I'm Richard Weiss. I'm a neighbor at 1034 Nielsen. I'm also an architect and I design and plan hospitals. I think Laura and Dan have come up with a wonderful plan, and I fully I like it, and I fully accept it myself as a neighbor. It's very thoughtful. They have a very thoughtful design, and I think Laura's expertise as structural engineer lends seismic and structural integrity. I wrote all this down in a letter. Did you all get it? Did you all get the email and read it? Oh, terrific. Okay, so I'll just say that I think the addition and improvements will be a great asset to the family, to Albany, and our neighborhood. And thank you very much.
Thank you. It looks like there's one more speaker in the queue, Chris.
Yes, we have one more speaker. I'm thinking this is Jeremiah. Jeremiah, you have 3 minutes to speak starting now.
Yeah, hi. I just logged on. Is this general public comment or is this public comment to the specific agenda item?
For this specific item.
Okay, then I give up my time. Thank
you. I'm seeing no other speakers.
Okay, this is last call for public comment on this item. Now is your last opportunity to raise your hand. Seeing none, we'll go ahead and close public comment and turn it back to the commissioners for deliberations. Would anyone like to kick things off here? Sure, Commissioner Donaldson.
Yeah, certainly. I think it's a very attractive project and I really like it. I can support the both of the special items here, the parking exception. I think it's good that they're creating a parking spot there where they are in the front yard, and I think that'll work. And the conditional use permit for the vertical wall extension, I also have no problem with it. I like the design of the existing house. It's a unique kind of thing with those columns in front and a very balanced structure. But I really also like the proposal to convert the house into sort of a craftsman style. And I think the design is very attractive and that it will be an asset to the neighborhood. I really have no problem with it at all.
Commissioner Pilch.
Oh, sure. Yeah, I can second those comments. I don't have a problem with the project, but I do appreciate Commissioner McLeod bringing up the all-electric. You can have solar with battery storage and take care of the issue of power outages, so you don't need gas for that. So the applicant just might consider if they do have gas, they might be a little bit behind at times, but that's not something we can impose on you, unfortunately. And I do appreciate the chair's mention of the lights, of having a spacer bar in there. I have seen some bad simulated divided light designs or window implementations. So, but it sounds like there's not an option with the line of window that you're choosing, but do take care to maybe look at those before purchase to make sure that they have a nice look to them. Otherwise, I'm in favor of the project. Thanks.
Great, Commissioner McLeod.
I support the non-conforming wall. I think that's no problem. It's actually pretty minor in terms of distance to the property line. And the parking exception seems fine. They're going to a lot of expense and trouble to excavate in and create the garage parking lot. And I think having this other one on the outside is a very, very balanced trade-off for that. I would also just, I think the simulated divided lights, I think Marvin does provide those for the essential windows. I'm pretty sure, but you'll have to check. I mean, I think if Marvin does provide it, then I think it should be included in the window package. Not really a big expense at all. And those are fine windows. They are a little bit flat on the plane on the outside, so they do need to be recessed from the wall plane, the exterior wall plane. So that's something to look at in the detailing. And then as far as concerns about sustainability and renewable energy and all that, I would really encourage you, when you're doing this much construction, you have the perfect opportunity to go all electric, change your appliances. They're much more efficient. Heat pumps are much more efficient, 4 times more efficient than gas appliances or gas heaters. And like Commissioner Pilch said, you put solar panels on your roof and have a battery backup system, and you have 100% reliability in any kind of emergency or natural disaster. And it is part of our climate action plan to encourage this. So that's what I'm thinking about. And with East Bay Community Energy, you have 100% renewable energy option. So you can basically get to net zero. So if sustainability is one of your concerns, I would strongly urge you to go all electric. Otherwise, I support the project. Thank you.
Thanks. Commissioner Momin.
Yeah, I concur with my fellow commissioners' comments. Overall, it looks a nicely designed project, and I appreciate applicants' efforts in moving the garage from the front setback into basement. It's a big improvement. I have no issues with the parking concession and the non-conforming wall continuation. I support the project.
Great, thanks. I'll just round things out here. I think it's a well-designed project and support the project. Similarly, I find the conditional use, it's a very nominal, and as I've said before on similar conditional use requests, I think it makes a lot of sense to be able to extend vertically up for both structural reasons and for design reasons. So, this is less than a 1/4 inch deviation from the requirement. And on the parking, again, to me, you're going from an existing non-complying space that's encroaching into the right of way with a very narrow door that's probably hard to access and probably not terribly well used, to one that actually seems practically used. And then you still also have a space in the front driveway, which again is, to me, sort of probably 2 spaces better than what you've got right now. So I certainly see it as a net positive on parking, not a negative. I also don't think there's a dramatic increase in parking demand caused by a vertical addition for a family that would live there either way. So for all of those reasons, I'm happy to support the project as proposed. I would certainly encourage you to do the spacer bar in between the panes of glass. I think if any, it's a nominal increase in cost, and you really do see the value from the street when you get that extra shadow line and depth from the spacer bar. So I'd encourage you guys to pursue that, especially if you're going through the expense of the Marvin product line anyhow. So with that, I would be certainly supportive of a motion if anyone would like to make one. Commissioner Donaldson?
I'll move approval of planning application 21072. Design review, parking exception, and a conditional use permit for a 2nd-story addition at 1019 Peralta.
Thanks. Do we have a second on that motion?
I can second.
Okay, Commissioner Pilch. Great. Then on that motion, Commissioner McLeod.
Yes.
Commissioner Momin.
Yes.
Commissioner Pilch.
Yes.
Commissioner Donaldson.
Yes.
And I vote yes as well, so that your project has been approved 5-0. And just a reminder to keep those story polls up for the duration of the appeal period. And with that, we are moving on to our next item on our regular agenda here, item 7-2. This is planning application 21-071, design review and conditional use for a 2nd-story addition at 840 Masonic. So turn it over to you, staff.
Yes, thank you. Before you tonight is 840 Masonic Avenue for a 2nd-story addition. Some background on the property. The subject property is a 3,750 square foot lot with a 3-bedroom, 1.5 bathroom, 1,514 square foot house built in 1932. City records show no permits on file for substantial work on this property. Here's a street view of the property as it sits today on Masonic. And then here's just a photo of the story poles that were installed for this review. And project requests. The applicant is seeking design review for an 800 square foot 2nd-story addition to accommodate 2 bedrooms, 1 bathroom, and a new master suite on the 2nd floor. A conditional use permit is also being sought to demolish and rebuild a portion of the south wall, which is the garage, to address some dry rot repair and accommodate a new garage door. This overall project scope would result in a 4-bedroom, 3-bathroom, 2,049 square foot home with a maximum height of 27 feet. Here's an existing elevation of the home. And here's the proposed front elevation. Exceptional design. Projects which exceed a 0.45 FAR are subject to exceptional design as reviewed by the Planning and Zoning Commission. These design treatments include a new contemporary architectural style for the home, exterior cladding to be in a combination of painted stucco and horizontal composite siding, a standing seam metal shed roof with a 12.3 slope for the second story, double hung slide and fixed windows are proposed throughout the home. A new wood deck and wood trellis above the garage space with access from the main level is proposed as well. A landscape plan was submitted indicating modest improvements to the front and rear of the property, which include new plants and planter boxes. Conditional use permit. The side yard setback requirement for the subject property is 3 foot 9 inches or 10% of the lot width. The existing south wall of the attached garage is located 2 feet 6 inches from the property line and is thus non-conforming with respect to side yard setback requirements. The applicant is proposing to demolish and rebuild a portion of the south wall to address dry rot and repair and accommodate a new garage door. A conditional use permit is required to demolish and rebuild the wall due to its proximity to the southern property line. The applicant is seeking approval from the Commission for the conditional use permit to rebuild the non-conforming south wall. Findings for the conditional use permit were included as attachment 2 of the staff report. And then here's a view of the site survey. You'll note that at its closest point, the garage wall is 2.5 feet from the property line and its widest point 2.8 feet. There's an existing attached garage towards the rear of the home. With respect to parking, there's an existing attached garage toward the rear of the home, which accommodates currently 1 off-street parking space. The applicant is proposing to demolish the front portion of the garage and rebuild it in kind. A total of 2 off-street parking spaces are proposed, 1 in the existing garage and 1 in the driveway in a tandem configuration. No additional off-street parking is required for this project. Staff has received 1 correspondence from a neighbor voicing potential privacy concerns with the elevated deck and trellis above the garage. The project is categorically exempt from CEQA per section 15303. And with that, staff recommends that the Planning and Zoning Commission review and approve the proposed project subject to the findings and conditions of approval. And with that, we're available to answer any questions. Thank you.
Great, thank you, staff. Maybe similarly, we'll just, as the project sponsor here with a presentation.
Yes, I saw the project applicant. She is here. I'll allow her, Sujin, to speak.
Yeah, why don't we go ahead and let her speak and then we'll turn it back to the commission for questions.
Okay. Sujin, you can speak whenever you're ready.
Christopher.
Hi,
Hi.
Sujin.
Hi. Can you let Dongjin speak for this
Oh,
project?
Sure. One moment.
Hello.
Hello.
Hello. Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Hello? Okay. My name is Dongjin Seo. I'm a project designer for this project. Thank you for having me here today. And let me introduce this project briefly. So this new addition will be home to our client who has two little kids, one little boy and one little baby girl. And the most important thing for our client is actually, having all their 3 bedroom for their parent and kids at the same location. So they are really concerned about, the taking care of their baby so that, whenever there is a need, they want to immediately and accessible to their kids. So that's the reason, they added the second story addition where all these 3 bedrooms are co-located. So this programming need is really drive our project here. So by achieving that one, so that overall square footage is go over the FAR requirement, so that we cut the space from the existing the space over the garage, so that this is the opportunity to create an outdoor deck. Also, we transfer and change the existing program of the bedroom at the backside of a building, which is on a skip floor. So we change that program to the family room, so that all the private family area is located at the backside of the building. And after we determine the massing driven by the program, another really the key thing to the client is, and this is not the current scope of work, but in the near future, client consider the solar panel. So this new addition want to be ready for the new solar panel in the future. So this drives the roof shape of this design to be just a single slab roof, which will provide the opportunity to maximize the solar panel area. Of course, this is lower than the height limit. And then the front side, as we have this diagonal line from the front facade, we have the front facade a little bit of the give a modification to this one with the opposite direction of the slope, which give you some sort of the balance to the geometry composition. And the material-wise, mostly we maintain the existing stucco finish, but because of the volume with the second story addition, so we start to address a new different material, which is the composite siding, which will divide this massing, so that particularly this really help when we looking at look this building from the north side, which is really in the one single big plain wall. So with the 3 different material, it breaks down the whole scale, and it gives you a little more intimate scale to this building. And another one thing that over the new exterior deck, so we consider the privacy concern to the neighbor on the south side. So we introduced the fixed planting box, so that it gives a little bit of solid the surface to improve the privacy between these 2 neighbors. So I think that's about it, and thank you very much for your time, and I will appreciate any kind of comment on our project. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Commissioners, are there any questions for either staff or for the project applicant? Commissioner McLeod, go ahead.
Yeah, I guess I have one question for the applicant. Are you vaulting the interior spaces on the second floor underneath that big shed roof?
Yeah, of course, we take an advantage of this roof shape as much as possible, but part of that space will be dedicated to this mechanical the unit up there. But yes, we'll consider the higher ceiling for the bedroom along the north side. So it's not fully reserved yet, but.
Okay, thank you.
I had a couple questions for the project engineer here. Can you clarify a little bit when you reference the composite siding? Can you give a little more detail of what that actual material is?
So the product name, the product that we are really looking at is actually the new tech wood. So this is new tech wood. This is composite material composited with the wood and the the plastic, the material. This gives you the real wood looking. Also, there is the color, the option that our client is really looking at. So it's pretty much similar to the rendering. The tone is a little bit different, but it's just pretty much similar to the color, texture and color in the rendering. So we consider that as the UTEC wood for the composite siding.
Got it. So it's a wood plastic composite material.
Correct.
That has a texture of wood, like a wood grain finish.
Exactly. Yes. Correct.
Okay. Thank you on that. And then just to clarify, so the windows that you're calling out according to the window schedule are Anderson 400 series. So those are vinyl clad windows. Is that right?
Correct.
Okay. And then I think those were my only, oh, maybe one other question. I'm just a little bit curious on the design intent along the north side of the second story addition, where that composite siding is applied, just kind of spans. It feels a little arbitrary between the east and west side windows on that north side. And I'm just wondering if you can kind of talk through what your design intention was around that, or sort of vision for it. It just, from the elevations, it feels a little tacked on, but
yeah,
perhaps you can talk through your design intention there.
Yeah, I know that it is really hard, of course. So because of the setback issue, so there's, this whole facade is really just a flat. But the way I read the massing here is, if you're looking at maybe the render three-dimensional view will be more clearer. So there is basically the bluish, the box is at the bottom, and then actually there is a layer of around the second volume, which is just a stop at the the head of the second story, the window. So that's the actual concept. Actually, it would be great if there is a little bit of the the offset from the composite material to the stucco above. Then it will express express the composition better way, I think. But well, unfortunately we can't. There is it gotta be just a straight wall. So I think that it's a little hard to achieve that kind of a composition.
And I was on the north face of the second story addition. So Chris, I think it's that I think is the south side that you're showing there on the bottom left.
That is the north side.
Oh, that is the north side.
So this image is.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Right
I meant the south side. I meant the south side.
Oh, you meant the south
sorry.
side.
Don't know why you wouldn't know what I was thinking there. No, on this side, yes, where it's sort of applied between the two windows. Just talking about how does that get detailed, given that it looks like it's probably just a couple inches proud of the primary building wall.
Yeah, I think in real, I think this is a rendering issue. I think it's not as accurate as the detail. I think that the detail will be this siding material will be pretty much flush with the stucco finish.
Okay, the elevations do show a couple inches as well. So the elevations seem to match the rendering, but I wasn't sure how that transition would be detailed.
Yeah, there will be the flashing, the metal flashing between the metal stucco and composite wood. So there will be continuous, the flashing line will be there actually.
Okay, so instead of there being this shadow line, it will be just flat with flashing, separating the stucco from the composite siding?
Correct.
Okay, thank you. I think that's all of my questions. Commissioner Momin, you had your hand up, and then we'll go to Commissioner McLeod.
Yeah, just a minor question about the composite panels. How does the composite panels perform in ultraviolet light, like prolonged sunlight exposure? Is there any possibility of getting them discolored? And if they do, what is your remedy for that? Would you be painting them or?
No, there's no painting on it. It's you can think this is kind of a T-Rex version of the
Maybe.
siding.
Uh-huh.
So there is a little bit of sheen, definitely a little bit of sheen to it. A little bit of the reflection to it. It's pretty much similar to the typical wood siding.
Okay, they don't get discolored over the time.
You mean the UV matter?
Yeah.
So I think this product is a little bit better than the previous version of the composite material.
Okay.
So,
That's it. Thank you.
Commissioner McLeod?
Yeah, my question is for staff. We have the non-conforming wall at the garage. But then the roof deck is actually extending into the non-conforming space or into the setback. So isn't that required to have a conditional use permit to have a deck within a setback or some sort of, I just know in my work, if we start extending into the setback with the roof, with any kind of deck, we are faced with additional requirements or additional restrictions. So could you respond to that, please? I mean, basically the deck will be non-conforming. That's my.
It's effectively a vertical extension of the non-conforming wall, which is how they can build that deck out. Of course, they'll have to, they're rebuilding a portion of that wall. They'll have to engineer that for live load on top, but they can do that through the use permit process.
So is that part of our conditions of approval that the roof deck is allowed to be non-conforming? Seems like we're not addressing that.
The use permit can cover the deck, yes. The code isn't explicit about roof decks in that encroachment in that area, because we're talking about the wall plane itself, because it's not a fully built wall. It can, the conditional use permit can also apply to that. Alternatively, a condition can be placed that the roof deck be recessed to be compliant strictly with setback regulations above the garage, but there was an existing wall there originally, which the applicant is proposing to remove to accommodate the FAR, reconfiguring with the second story addition. So there was a wall there above it that's enclosed, but the applicant.
Okay, so there was a second story structure there above the.
Yeah, if you look at, we can look at the,
oh, I see. On the south elevation of the existing, there was a room.
It was all originally enclosed, yeah, where that deck is.
Yeah. Okay, so, all right, I still.
Right here, yep.
So we are being asked to extend that, that non-conforming wall becomes part of the deck. I'm still a little confused as to how that deck is being, approved in our language or in the language of what we're asked to look at tonight. So,
Ian, I had the same. Am I on?
yeah, I'll just listen here. That's fine.
I had the same thought, and then I went back and reread the staff report, and the sentence I thought was important said, a conditional use permit is required to demolish and rebuild a portion of the garage and build a new roof terrace.
Okay.
feet 6 from the property line, where 3.9 is required. So I read that and I thought, well, I think that covers it.
Okay.
You would be permitting that deck as designed. Now, I suppose if you modify the design, that's our option, but I thought it was, I looked at it and I thought it was covered.
Okay, fair enough. Thank you for the clarification.
Any other questions before we go ahead and open up public comment? Okay, Great. Then why don't we go ahead and open it up for public comment? Members of the public, now is your opportunity to get in the queue. Raise your hand if you would like to speak on this item. Now is your time. Staff, do we have any speakers?
Yes, we have one speaker, Jeremiah. Jeremiah, you have 3 minutes to speak starting now.
Good evening. Thank you. So my question really is concerning the fire department's access to the one side. I guess it was less than 3 feet from the garage to the side wall. I'm not sure if I'm correct or not. I was just curious what the setbacks are for the fire department. I don't know if it's 3 feet or 5 feet or whatever the setback is. And also, my next question was going to be, what kind of smoke alarms and fire detectors, carbon monoxide, are you going to be putting in the addition? Whatever you're putting in, I don't know. I would suggest the 10-year detector. That way you don't have to use the 9-volt batteries every year. So those always go out. So my suggestion, use the 10-year, and also please let me know what the setbacks are for the fire department. Thank you.
Thank you. Do we have any other speakers in the queue for public comment?
No, I'm not seeing any others.
Okay, last call. Oh, go ahead, Ann.
I just wanted to for the commission's information, for the last speaker's information, given the scale of this project, it is required to have fire sprinklers installed throughout the entirety of the house as a condition of the project. Additionally, hardwired smoke detectors are required, which means that they're interconnected and they're hardwired into the system of the house. As far as setback and separation goes, I think Chris covered it. There's a 3'9" setback requirement, which is satisfactory for for the fire department, even with these non-conforming walls that we have throughout the city. They're used to dealing with that.
Great, thank you for that clarification. All right, last call for public comment. Seeing no additional hands being raised, we will go ahead and close public comment on this item and turn it back to the commission for discussion and deliberation. Would anyone like to start? Commissioner Pilch, go ahead.
Sure, I'll go ahead and start. I don't have a lot to say. I actually like the design of this quite well. And it's nice that they have an outdoor space as well incorporated. Given the discussion at the beginning where the chair originally thought she was talking about the north or the south, anyway, got those confused. And we looked at the north face. It made me think that, the reason why we can't have a difference in, we don't have a difference in plane is because of the setback. However, one thing that you could do would be to take the second floor, some of the second floor space and move it back. You could move that, let's see, what wall is that? Where is it? You could move the plane where the second story windows are, you could move that back a couple inches. You'd lose a little interior space, but then you'd get the plane would be, it wouldn't be quite so flat. There'd be a difference in plane. Anyway, I'm not an architect, so I'll leave it to the architects to see if that idea makes any sense to them at all. Otherwise, I like the project and am fine with approving it.
Commissioner Momin.
Yeah, I think it is an impressive design. I really liked it. The contemporary language. I really hope we will see more such designs proposed in Albany. I don't have any issue with the northern side facade. Recessing that in might make it a little more expensive. Having a more pronounced ledge on top of the window head, I think could help, similar to what they already have at the bottom of the windows. Otherwise, I don't have any comments. It's a really nice project, and I really support that.
Commissioner Donaldson.
Yes, I think it's a very bold and dramatic design, and in a highly visible location on Masonic. And I really find it very attractive. I like the color scheme that's been proposed for it in general. And I'm happy with the rear deck over the garage. I think that will be acceptable. I think that will be fine for them. I'm glad they put in a little screening to the next door neighbor, even though the next door neighbor is the city, the city recreation department. But I think it's a very interesting project, and I look forward to seeing it built. Actually, I think it'll be a real asset on that street. So.
Commissioner McLeod.
Yeah, I agree with the other comments. Yeah, I like the kind of strong, bold design. Floor plan makes sense, and the roof deck is fine, actually, I mean, as long as the language is there. The only thing I struggle with a little bit is that tall wall on the north side, just how, sort of vertical it is. There is an attempt to break it up with massing and all that. And I do appreciate the applicant's desire to make it solar ready. That would be, in fact, the perfect solar plane. And with a standing seam roof, you just clip the panels on there. So in that sense, it makes a lot of sense. I mean, when I see the story poles, it looks pretty tall and big from the north side. But at least there is some space there to the, on the other neighbor's side. So, as long as there's this effort to break it up with the massing a bit with the composite wood and the stucco above. I mean, if the ceilings were vaulted, I would be putting high windows in that upper section of stucco that would help break it up a little more. If you had a sloping roof up high enough, you could add some more windows up there, which would animate that space a little bit more and bring in nice north light into your rooms. They wouldn't have to be big windows necessarily. I would appreciate something like that instead of just the big band of stucco at the top. I think, it'd be nice to have some relief in that, or perhaps the composite wood could go up a little higher and reduce the size of that stucco band there. Balance that a little bit more, or make your windows taller on that side, something like that. I would appreciate something like that, but I do appreciate the effort to break it up with materials at least. And the other alternative would be, not drop that stucco down and take the composite wood up higher or something, but or tilt the roof back a little bit. Yeah, I don't know, it changes the whole look of the front, but anyway, those are my thoughts. I'm happy to support the project, though. So thank you.
Well, happy to provide just a couple of comments. I do similarly appreciate the contemporary design and like the building form that is being proposed here. I do have a couple concerns about some of the material choices, just in terms of meeting the standard of exceptional design. The composite material, to me, I checked out their website after you gave us the name, and it does feel very plastic looking. It doesn't feel like a high quality material that we would want to see on an exterior of a building with sort of that exceptional design standard. I know often with these non-wood products, but that provide a wood grain, they often tend to look very sort of faux and cheaply applied. I think it's one of the reasons we often ask for a smooth finish when it comes to fiber cement paneling versus the wood grain finish that is often an option. So I do have a little bit of a concern about that choice of material in general. I don't have an issue with a siding material being applied in the manner that's being proposed, but the specific choice of material, I do have concerns about its quality. Similarly, vinyl clad windows, they're certainly better than solid vinyl windows, but I also don't feel like they're quite up to the standard of exceptional design when that is the design standard that we're required to make that finding. And so that would be one of my comments on it. And then two other quick comments. One, the landscaping plan to me doesn't really look like a landscaping plan. I know we've had this issue recently on some other projects. This kind of looks like a planting plan that reflects basically what's already on the lot, which isn't a terribly robust landscape job at the moment. And so I would certainly want to see as a condition of approval that there's a landscape architect retained and a proper landscape plan prepared. There's almost nothing being proposed in the rear yard. The driveway is entirely just concrete. And the front yard, is articulating small, medium, and large plant trees, which I don't think is usually the standard. I know we often relied on our former colleague who was a landscape architect to provide these robust details in the past. So I'm trying to channel him a bit here. But I do feel like the landscape plan is leaving a bit to be desired. And then just my last comment would be, I would echo Commissioner McLeod's comments on the vaulted ceiling side of the north side, getting my directions right, on the north side of the building here. I do think something like a clear story window or some sort of extension of glazing would really, it seems like that's really the missing piece, like it's intended to be there. So whether that is through just extending the existing window systems up vertically or to do a more intentional horizontal band of some sort of transoms or clear stories or whatnot, that would be my recommendation in terms of a design move over there. But those are sort of my general concerns. I feel like on a contemporary building like this that is fairly simple, to me, the devil is very much in the detailing. The quality of stucco, the application of the stucco, the quality of the siding, the quality of the windows, the reveal of the windows, those are the details that can make this be an exceptional project with contemporary design, or that can make it feel a little lackluster. And so right now I don't have 100% confidence in the quality of the application of the materials, but that wraps my comments. Commissioner McLeod?
Yeah, I just want to agree 100% with your comments, especially about vinyl windows. I really don't think it's a good product. I don't think they look good. I think
Well, it's vinyl clad, right?
Vinyl clad tends to degrade over time. Vinyl is a pretty toxic material in terms of its production. It's not considered sustainable. And it's actually not that durable. I mean, it degrades over time in sunlight, starts cracking and chipping, and then you're faced with replacing your windows. So I would argue or suggest aluminum clad windows. And I have similar misgivings about the siding material, sort of a Trex-like thing, which does look kind of rubbery. I don't know about this product in particular. I've never used it, but sort of the clean, crisp detailing of this project would make it stand out more than having a sort of wood textured product. I think a smooth product, fiber cement, there's some very good fiber cement boards that are a little thicker, that provide a little more, there's more shadow lines, or if it's just even smoother, I think it would look better. I mean, there may be other composite materials that are okay, but I would strongly agree with Chair Waddy's suggestion to use a different material for that. And again, looking at just the north elevation, it seems like it's sort of split. The upper floor is kind of split half and half, and that sort of, it's almost too big of a band of stucco at the top. I'd like to see that band of stucco reduced a little bit by raising the wall, the textured wall and the windows up, the siding up, or punctuating it with some small clear story windows or some sort of treatment of that to break up that upper mass a little bit. So yeah, in that sense, I agree 100% with Chair Waddy.
Commissioner Donaldson?
Yes, I'm persuaded by your comments as well. And I think they're very good. So I'm trying to figure out what we should do here. And either is this appropriate for a continuance with making some design changes? Is this something we could approve with conditions and maybe subject to staff reviewing the materials? Would that be good enough? Or it sounds like we're talking about a pretty significant change in material choices on the siding and on the windows. So I don't know what might be the best thing to do.
Well, and my thought on this would be, I would be certainly happy to see this back on the consent calendar. I think there are a few really clear items, but the fact that we don't have a landscape plan, in my opinion, really at all right now, I think that will require a little bit of time. I want to be sensitive to the fact we don't have a hearing scheduled at our next hearing, but on the flip side, it probably will take a little bit of time to get a landscape architect on board and prepare sort of a more detailed landscape plan. So I would be certainly supportive of it coming back to us for action on the consent calendar. Certainly if staff, you guys are no sweat, we can handle this, really clear direction, and you want to do that, I would defer a little bit to staff on this. To me is right teetering on the line of approving with conditions to staff versus putting back on the calendar. So I'd love to hear your thoughts on what you would advise us on that.
I think we can go either way and give staff and the applicant an additional chunk of time to make any refinements. If you're comfortable with conditions, we're happy to do that. We've done this obviously at other projects where we evaluate for compliance at building permit submittal. And generally when we deal with really proactive applicants, and I think this applicant fits the bill, they'll actually check in with us before even making a submittal. So, again, we can go either way with this.
Okay. Well, given that, I would be certainly supportive of, trying to maybe pull together a motion here where we can defer some of these conditions to subsequent follow-up with staff. So I know I don't usually, if anyone else would like to make a motion, happy to, but I'm also happy to take a stab since
Well, I can try. The only,
Sure, thank you.
Sure. The only issue I have is, are we wanting to say just no vinyl clad windows, or are we wanting to say aluminum clad, or what do we want to say for the windows?
I mean, I would encourage either an aluminum clad or a high quality fiberglass or, 100% wood. I think what's hard in there are other window products out there, certainly. There are some incredibly high quality, fully aluminum windows that on a contemporary design could be nice. I don't know if the project sponsor wants to do that, but maybe articulate high quality windows excluding vinyl. Commissioner McLeod, did you have a verbiage suggestion on that one?
Well, I would just say no vinyl windows. There are other options besides aluminum clad, right? There are aluminum windows with thermal breaks that do meet code and look really good. They tend to be pretty expensive, but they look great. Or, all wood, but all wood is not really recommended either because the wood is prone more to rot. It doesn't really last as long anymore.
It sounds like just no vinyl clad is the bottom line.
I think that would be appropriate. Yeah.
Okay. And then for the siding, specify smooth siding, maybe? Or
and a non sort of plastic composite material.
Okay. All right. Well, then I will try to make a motion to approve planning application 21-071 with the following conditions, additional conditions. The hiring of a landscape designer and production of a landscape plan, smooth siding that's not plastic wood composite, the change out of the vinyl clad windows to some other higher quality window, and to work with staff on the I don't know how to say it, breaking up of the north side with whatever features the staff works out with the applicant. How's that?
Great. I think staff, do you have clear enough guidance from our discussion in that motion?
I think on the north facade, it would be to try to minimize a bit the upper stucco band, either by raising the wood or composite siding or providing some clear story windows or or
Mhm.
some combination thereof.
Yeah, so staff has some ideas there,
Yeah.
basically to make changes, work with staff to make changes there, so.
Yeah, I think the band would look better, either a little thinner, I mean, with the siding going up a little higher, or, I mean, you could do something artistic with, you know, sort of punching windows into that open, or that band as well, that could look quite nice and provide very nice daylighting for the interior.
Great. I think we've got then a motion with that friendly elaborative amendment by Commissioner
Pointing at things.
McLeod. On that motion, do we have a second?
I'll second.
Okay, great. Seconded by Commissioner McLeod. Then on that motion, Commissioner Donaldson,
Yes. Mhm.
Commissioner Moman,
Yes.
Commissioner McLeod,
Yes.
Commissioner Pilch,
Yes.
and I vote yes on that motion as well. So that motion is approved 5-0. And just a reminder to keep those story polls up for the duration of the appeal period. But otherwise that item is approved. So thank you for your continued work on staff to execute those details. And with that, move along on our agenda. Item 8, new business, of which there is none. 9 on our agenda, next meeting, November 10th. 2021, same time, same digital place, I believe. And with that, we are adjourned. Thank you, everyone.
Okay, thank you all.
Thank you.
Good night.
Right.